IB Nation, welcome back to the Irish Breakdown Podcast. Kicking off Notre Dame versus Pitt this week, a big Saturday game. Notre Dame now sitting at 6-2 on the season and ready to kick off their final 4-game stretch after a bye week. Pitt limping into this game a little bit, got some injuries on their roster. Not a great football team so far in 2023, but we've seen a pesky Pitt team in the past for in some Notre Dame games. So a game that we are excited to break down for you all. Get us rocking here. We'll talk about the Notre Dame defense, the Notre Dame offense, the Pitt defense in the preview at the end as well. We'll also be doing a mailbag after the show as well. So make sure at any time, if you have a mailbag question, it could be about Notre Dame, it could be about Pitt, it could be about anything in football that you want to, maybe something you saw from this past week. What do you want to see down the stretch of the college football season? Throw it in the chat.
People asked me draft questions yesterday, man. I was like, guys, I'm gonna be with Ryan tomorrow, man.
yeah. So throw those into the chat at any time, and we'll be able to get those up there in the mailbag. Make sure you put MB before, just so we can distinguish what is a mailbag question and what is, just general chatter in the chat. We want to make sure that we allow you guys to have your conversations going on in there. And Brian, I know we're excited about this game, obviously. Notre Dame back at home. It's going to be a little bit of a recruiting weekend, some guys on campus as well. I know that we also want to dig into what to make of this football game, right? As far as what Notre Dame needs to do, what they don't need to do, the questions that remain answered. But I know we really want to open up this conversation coming out of a bye. We did a little bit of this past week as far as things we want to see from this Notre Dame team, questions we still had. But we really want to kind of talk about this and break it down offensively, defensively from the Notre Dame side, questions that we still have. And I think, Brian, the real thing that we want to talk about is not only the questions that we need to answer, but it's not about just winning 4-0 down the stretch.
Mm-hmm.
Like, of course, that's the objective. You want to win every football game from here on out if you're Notre Dame. But you want to do it in a way that shows sustainability. You want to do it in a way that shows growth. I think that's the biggest keys down the stretch here for Notre Dame.
You nailed it, Ryan. And it's what Marcus Freeman says the mantra of the team is all about, right? It's like, hey, guys, this isn't about the other team. This isn't about, it's the process. It's about playing to a certain standard. It's about Notre Dame football. So it's not just about going out and beating Pitt and beating Clemson and beating Wake and beating Stanford. That's obviously the ultimate result of the process and the desired result of the process. And if the process is handled correctly, Notre Dame will go 4-0. But Notre Dame could go 4-0 down the stretch, Ryan, and kind of like 2021, where Notre Dame kept winning, but you're like, this is a very flawed football team. They're just beating inferior opponents, and that's kind of how it was. I mean, 2021 is a great example. They skated by Florida State in a game they almost blew. They had to come from behind to beat Toledo. They had to come from behind. Jack Cohn has to come off the bench and rally them against Virginia Tech. And anytime they played a good opponent, it was like, it's a tough ball game. You're losing early in the fourth quarter against an okay Wisconsin team. The final score ends up being a lot more decisive than the actual game was played out. And then you get to the end of the season and you're playing, Stanford, who's awful. You're playing Georgia Tech, who's awful. You're playing Navy, who's awful. You're playing North Carolina, who's just kind of meh. You play a not very good USC team whose coach is in the midst of about to getting fired. They're going through a 4-8 season. And, it was fool's gold to a degree about how good that team actually was, and then of course you had the Cincinnati game where you got your butts kicked as a team. And so, you look at the 11-1 and you're like, but that wasn't a great football team. So it's about, okay, can you play to your potential as a football team, not just out talent your next 4 opponents, which including Clemson, you should. And the matchups favor you in a lot of ways. Clemson doesn't have the ingredients that Ohio State had, or more importantly, that Louisville had to pull off the upset, with the dynamic playmakers. They don't have that. So it should be a 4-0 stretch for Notre Dame, but 4-0 stretch doesn't mean that your football team has really turned the corner. And that's really what it comes down to. Have you turned the corner to where, you're a talented team, you do some things well, but can you really take that next step? And that's what these questions are about. And we addressed some of them last week. We went into detail about certain things last week. But just saying, like, these are the things that we have about this football team in the final stretches are going to tell us if this team was able to do what's needed, which tells us a lot about the coaching staff and tells us a lot about the players. And if these questions get answered in the affirmative, not only is Notre Dame going to go 4-0, but we're going to feel really good about that 4-0, because there's a scenario, Ryan, where they could go 4-0, and you and I are sitting there like,
Yeah.
there's some problems. There's some problems
Yeah.
that need to get addressed, and I don't know if I love this bowl matchup because Notre Dame is basically, kind of muddied through the last 4 games, and they're not going to be able to do that against whoever they're playing in this bowl game.
Well, I think 2021 is the perfect example, Brian. Like, that was the most hollow 11-1 season that I could ever remember. Like, I remember watching that team. I'm like, your offensive line's not very good. Like, your defense is a
Right.
little bit of a mess in certain areas. Like, it just wasn't sustainable, right? Like, there, even if Brian Kelly would have stayed, there would have had to been like a, hey guys, we need to take a step back and like think some things through here, right? Because something's not working here. Offensive line development is not working. Quarterback development is not working. We need to figure this guy out kind of moving forward. So I think 2021 is a really good example. I think that this is a very interesting conversation because we did have a little bit of a mirror conversation to this last week, but it's a completely different animal because we're talking about going into a bye week. What are some things that we want to see this team be able to do? Now we're coming out of the bye with kind of I think a little bit hopeful as far as like, I think we'll see this. I think we'll see that. I hope we see this. I hope we see that. And before we know it, in only a few days here, we'll see if the identity is actualized for Notre Dame, or it just is a little bit of the same back and forth tug. And, it's just the identity failure, I think, has kind of been the biggest thing that I've been kind of searching for this year, especially offensively.
Because one of the things that I felt really good about last season, Ryan, even though the record was 9-4, is
Yep.
the way they finished. Like it was like, okay, this coaching staff was able to push the right buttons to really get this team for the most part. I mean, it wasn't perfect. I mean, you had the USC loss, which, there's some good things came from that. And USC was just a better team than you were last year. There was the second half against Navy and all that other kind of stuff. But when it comes down to it, Ryan, it's like you saw steps being taken last season, and it points to like,
Yep.
9-4. I kind of felt better about 9-4 than I did about 11-1, because I felt like you saw growth, as you
Yep.
mentioned earlier. You saw growth from that football team. Now we need to see if this team can continue that moving forward, and that's what we're going to find out. And that's these questions that we're going to bring up, Ryan, are going to tell us a lot about whether or not they've made that growth. And for me, always trying to look at it from a coaching standpoint, do they have a staff in place
Yep.
that can push the right buttons to bring about that growth? That for me is the most intriguing kind of storyline type of thing for me, coming into this game, or coming into this stretch. And then of course it begins with Pitt, because I would argue that from a pure matchup standpoint, there are some aspects where Pitt actually gives you some of the more toughest matchups from a coaching scheme standpoint. They don't have the personnel of other teams, but they can present some problems to where you can win the game, but it's sloppy, it's ugly, because your players are just better than their players. But you got out coached. On the flip side, if the opposite happens, you start saying, man, they went out there and did this against that defense, and that, then you feel like, okay, they've been able to hit the right buttons. And so that's why this is an important part of the conversation.
And of course, we'll talk about things on both sides of the football, because although the Notre Dame defense has mostly been very good this year, there's always things that you can improve on. I think that's the great thing about football in general, is that there's always things that you can take a next step in. There's always growth opportunities in the game of football, in my opinion. So we'll talk about defense. But Brian, of course, we have to start with the offense, because you talked about the ugly, and Notre Dame's offense has been pretty dang good at times, pretty ugly at others, very underwhelming at other times. Like, it's been a very mixed bag is the best way to put it. It feels like almost the tale of two seasons at this point, as far as first 4 games, you felt really good about what the offense was running towards. And then the next 4, you're just kind of like, man, I don't know here. Like, there's a lot that's involved in that. Obviously, we talk about the injuries at wide receiver. You talk about maybe the lack of trust with certain wide receivers in this offense. You talk about the offensive line shuffling at one point and then just maybe not taking their game to the next level in certain spots. And we talk about an identity crisis a little bit offensively, of like, what does this team want to be? What should they want to be? And those conversations all kind of are intertwined. So I think offensively, Brian, like, that was the one we spent most time on last week. because it is the side of the football that needs the most adjustments. Like, we need to figure out coming out of the bye week, this is a perfect opportunity for a offensive coaching staff and an offense as a whole to take a step back, reassess, reevaluate, and really develop a deeper understanding for who you are and what you want to be and how to best get there down the stretch. And I think that this is a best opportunity for a post bye adjustment period to see what Notre Dame really wants to be offensively.
I think you would agree with me on this statement, Ryan. Notre Dame has played well enough defensively to be 8-0 right now.
Yeah,
I mean, even the
sure.
Louisville game, you held them to 7 points at halftime. You
Yep.
forced a fumble early in the second half. A better offense, once Louisville's offense starts kind of heating up in the second half, they're down 17, 20 points, right? You had these opportunities against Duke. You're up 10-0. You had offense mainly because of your special teams on a fake punt and your defense giving you a short field on a pick. You had chances to put them away. Couldn't do it. Why? Because the offense, right, wasn't able to do that. So
Yep.
defensively, you've done what you needed to do. We'll get into that
Yes.
side of the ball next. It's like you said, it's the offense that's the big question mark, Ryan.
Yep.
And so the biggest question we have is, what will the post buy adjustments be? I don't know what they're going to be. And, we have our certain ideas on what our philosophy are as football. But at the end of the day, I'm not as focused on that. We've talked about a lot of that last week. It's more about, I just want to see what they are and if they work. Because I think,
Yep.
you and I have talked about this a lot in the past, Ryan. And the reality is there's offenses that I like that work, and there's offenses that I like that don't work. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to be successful in football. I believe this way, you believe that way. The Notre Dame coaching staff may believe another way. At the end of the
Yep.
day, what matters is, but can it work? Can whatever you want to do, does it work? Can you find a cohesive, like you said, we're using that word identity a lot. Can you figure out who you want to be and then steer everything towards that and then maximize whatever that you have? Because here's the good thing, Ryan. This is going to be the healthiest Notre Dame has been on offense in a month. Jaden Thomas
They
is
needed
back.
that bye week. They
Big
needed the bye
time.
week very
Big
badly.
time.
Yes.
Greathouse is going to be healthier. I mean, part of the issue with receivers, we found out, I talked about this yesterday. I found out during the bye week that half the receiving corps wasn't even practicing really during the week. And it's hard to get on the same page with a first-year quarterback at that school, bunch of freshmen and things like that when the guys aren't practicing. And so that's not an excuse anymore. You had the bye week period. You've now got this week. You're healthy. You get guys out there. So you should be in a position to at least get on the same page a little bit more. Now you have all your tools as a coordinator, as a receivers coach, as an O-line coach, as a running backs coach, tight ends coach. I mean, tight end room is as healthy now as it's been all year, Ryan, because now Eli Raridan's now going into week 3 or 4 that he's in here. He got a bye week.
Yep.
Mitchell Evans got a week to rest up because he'd been dealing with some nagging stuff. So you're going to be healthy as you've been in a while going into this game. What are the adjustments they make? What are the things they do pass game wise to get their pass game going? What are the things they do run game wise to get their run game going? And we'll get into those specifics. But that's the biggest question for me, Ryan. And we don't need to necessarily spend a lot of time on what we want to see, because we did that last week. And we'll do that in some of the other things. But that's the biggest thing for me is I want to see what this offensive staff does. What personnel decisions do they make? And by personnel, I mean it twofold, Ryan. One is, okay, who are you riding with, right? We talked about last week. I have my opinion on who you need to get going at receiver. They may have a different opinion. I can say, hey, I consider and argue for Tobias or Chris or whatever. That's not really the point of this conversation. We've already made those. But who do you guys trust? And then roll with them and then build your offense around what those guys do well, right? And those are questions that I want to see this month is, okay, you figured out who you're rolling with, roll with them. And then the other part of the personnel is look at the makeup of your roster and say, hey, we're really good here. Maybe we're not as strong here. How are we going to use our personnel properly? And the one thing I will say specifically I want to see, Ryan, please, for the love of all things holy, stop with the nonstop rotations after every single play. Just like try to get into a rhythm, because that's the biggest thing. They've got to find a way to get into rhythm offensively. And it's hard to do that when you're just constantly running guys on and off the field. So we're going to see if they're willing to do that, because that tells me they've looked into something. Hey, why are we struggling? And we're really diving into the whys. It's not just about plays and X's and O's and execution and all that. Sometimes it's about we're not doing what we need to do as a staff to get these kids into the best position to be effective because of the way It may look good on a chalkboard, it may look good on a script sheet, Ryan, but it practically speaking, we're not allowing these young kids to get into. And I even include Chris Tyree in that young kid because he's basically a freshman as a wide receiver. You're
Yeah.
not allowing these guys to get into any kind of rhythm and flow in the game in a way that maybe you could get away with veterans, maybe, but you definitely can't with young guys. And that's why I say figure out who you want to be, roll with it, and let those guys get into rhythm.
Well, I think I'm hopeful for it, right? Because I mean, we even saw again. I don't want to read too much into like a depth chart, right? Because that doesn't tell the story. But there were a couple changes this week,
Right.
which I think it's a positive sign of like, whether you agree with it or don't agree with it as far as like who the players are. There was action that was made. It seems on paper, right? So now it's about actualizing that into production on the field and seeing if it was the right decision ultimately. But I agree, Brian. Like, I think that the worst thing you can get to is complacency and then get into this little middle ground of like, we want to make a change, but we're not sure if we should. And that's where that like really complacency kind of pops into your head. You know what I mean? A little bit. So I think this is an opportunity for you to take some chances, even like, I don't want to say chances because that sounds a little bit extreme, but like to get
Be
out of your
more
comfort zone a
aggressive.
little bit offensively.
Is that
Like, yeah,
kind of what
I
you're
mean,
saying, right?
yeah,
Like
aggressive,
be a
out
little
of
bit
your
more
comfort zone a
aggressive.
little
Yeah.
bit. Do what's best for the team and not what's best for your sanity, if that makes
Right.
sense, right? Like,
Yeah.
to take chances. I think chances is a good thing. Sometimes changes are needed. There's no question about it, especially offensively. And I think that we're seeing it. It seems like I just want to see it obviously now go onto the field, just not on paper anymore.
Yeah, because
So
like what the depth chart did kind of reflected what we saw against USC. We saw Rico Flores start, and it was nice to see like, Eli Raridan's in there and Cooper Flanagan's in there. And it's more reflective of, okay, this is who you have to roll with on this football team, right? And, when you look at the specifics, the biggest one for me is the pass game and the
yeah,
receiver play. And they kind of go
yeah,
hand in hand to a degree. They've got to get this part of the game rolling. And I'm not saying they got to come out and throw for 300 yards a game, but it has to be a greater weapon. And
agree.
when we get specifically into the matchup of Pitt, like tomorrow, Thursday, we'll dive in, and a little bit today, we'll dive into that even more because if you can't throw the football on Pitt, you're going to have a hard time scoring points against Pitt.
Right,
I mean, it's
right.
just simple as that. So,
Especially
and
efficiency in the
right,
passing game. Like, yeah,
right, and
yeah,
big plays in the pass game, which obviously, that's going to be part of the second half, the final stretch adjustments. But pass game wise, they've got to find ways to do three things. Number one, right, is you got to find some sort of rhythm in the pass game. Number one.
yes, yep,
Number two, you've got to do a better job, in my opinion, of building concepts that fit with the players that you want to have on the football field. Again, I don't. We'll dive into the how players are handled, who was handled this way, that way, right or wrong, good or bad, whatever, and more in the offseason. Right now, this is just who they are. We're going to evaluate who they are. You want to play Rico Flores more, Jaden Greathouse more, Chris Tyree, Jordan Faison, Jaden Thomas. Okay, it is what it is. But you can't keep running the plays you've been running with those players because that's not who they are. So you got to figure out how you want to use them. You've got this tight end depth chart. You've got to find better ways to use it all in
yeah,
part of your pass game. And you've got these really dynamic running backs that are a big play waiting to happen. Find more ways to get them involved in the pass game because you've got to do a better job using the weapons you have to get the pass game rolling. And
yes,
so that's going to have to be a big part of it. And then the receivers have to step up, Ryan, is like, look, you've got to play with more urgency. You got to play, it's up to Chancey Stuckey and this receiving core to start doing the things they need to do to get open more, to make the catches, to give Sam Hartman reason to, Sam Hartman needs to be more aggressive throwing the ball. Agree. They got to give him a reason to be more aggressive. Because if
right,
I'm a quarterback, if I don't have faith in you, like I'll tell you right now, Ryan, when I was a quarterback, if I had a guy like, I don't know if this guy's going to catch this ball or not, there were certain routes I'm just not throwing to him. I'm just sorry, not taking that chance. I can see the ball hitting off your hands and getting picked off. I'm not doing that. You got to give him a reason. It starts in practice, carries out in the games. So those are all things that this pass game has to get going because against Clemson, it's going to be the same story. We're going to have the same story next week as we have this week, Ryan. You're not going to be able to just assume you can go out and run the football on them like you did last year. That was an anomaly. We've said this. That was a
sure,
great game plan, great execution, but that was more of an anomaly.
sure,
You're going to need to be more balanced. Last two games, a little bit of a different story, but getting in the bowl game, You're going to have to be effective throwing the football these next 2 weeks. Can they push the right buttons from a coaching standpoint? Can Sam Hartman kind of put this group on his shoulders a little bit and say, hey, you're the veteran. You lead these guys. You get these guys going, right? That's part of your job. And then when they get those opportunities, can they step up and make those plays? This isn't an argument about who should step up, right? Whether Tobias, Tyree, it's not the point. Whoever they're putting out there, you guys got to step up and make plays at receiver, at tight end, and at running back. And then it's up to the coaching staff to make sure that you're getting those weapons in position to get the football. Like, I'm sorry, Ryan, you've got to do more to get Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price the football in space in the passing game. You just have to. It's going to take more pressure off the receivers anyway. And as you and I have been talking about all year, Ryan, those two guys plus Chris Tyree are your three most dynamic football players.
Yep. Well, I think. Sorry, I thought you were. Had a follow up.
You were rolling, man. Just keep going, baby. No.
So Brian, like, it's what I think is most interesting about the whole offensive conversation for me is that what was the reason you brought Sam Hartman to Notre Dame for, right? Because what was the best and worst of him at Wake Forest? Because it's all intertwined, in my opinion. The best was my guy was super aggressive, could attack down the field, wasn't afraid. There was no throw at Wake Forest that Sam Hartman was afraid to make. Not a single one, which is the biggest negative to his game at Wake Forest as well. The fact that, like, maybe you shouldn't have done that, Sam. Maybe that wasn't the best decision in the world, right? But that's what you love about him. And it's like the Brett Favre, John Elway-ish thing at a time, right? Where it's like, I'll take the good because there's a lot more good than there is bad a lot of times, right? And I thought that's why you brought Sam Hartman here, was to really get the explosiveness, get the aggressiveness in this passing game going. And we have seen him relegated throughout, for the most part of this year, to being a system player, a player that is just operating, and he's a 1-2, and let's get the ball out, and let's get the ball out on time, and let's not kill ourselves, and let's remain, very sound and safe with the football. And ultimately, he's done a pretty good job doing that. But, like, again, you're putting a cap on how explosive that you can be as a passing offense at this point, right? Like, you have done that. And I understand part of it at times because we've talked about it. Wide receiver group has been decimated by hamstring injury throughout the last few weeks, right? You're working with a half a group. You're working with guys that are not 100%. I mean, it's been obvious, right? So I understand you being hamstrung in times, but there really hasn't been too many moments this year, even during the 4-game stretch early on in the season, where I looked at him and said, they're letting Sam loose, man. They're looking at him and just letting him go and letting him fire and letting him be him. So I think that identity is a part of it. Like, that identity in the passing game is my biggest thing. The other thing too is that there's a reality where Notre Dame smacks Pitt this week, but the offensive output doesn't tell you anything about what you want to be as a team. It doesn't. There is a reality where you score 40 points against Pitt this week and win convincingly, and Sam Hartman throws for 180 yards or 200 yards, and he just plays safe football. You could do that as Notre Dame. You could do that. But is that going to win on a year-to-year basis against Ohio State, Georgia, the better teams on your schedule? Like, is that ever going to be a reality? I don't think it is. So the rebirth of reality, the rebirth of identity is what I want to see. I want to see aggressiveness. I called for this a couple games. We haven't really seen it much. It's usually a come out, run the football, establish the run, work off of it. This is a game where I'm like, dude, come out, be aggressive, and throw the football early, and let's get the mojo back. Sam Hartman has lost his mojo. He does not look like the same player the last couple of weeks that we thought he was going to be. When Sam is clicking and he is his confident self, he has swagger to him. The team is energized, and we have lost that energy and that identity a part of this team right now. So, yeah, man, come out swinging, come out aggressive. I want to see him. I'm not asking for him to go empty every play and do all that type of stuff, but, like, come out firing and be okay with being aggressive early on in this football game, man. Throw a shot, scheme something up. I want to see this passing game get a lot more explosive, a lot more exciting, because as it gets more exciting and a little bit more, I don't even want to call it exotic, just aggressive, the team will buy into it. You don't think young guys like Jaden Greathouse, who's back healthier now, Rico Flores, Tobias Merriweather as a sophomore, the young cats on this offense, you don't think that they want to get out there and throw the football around a little bit? That's what they came to Notre Dame to do. So I want to see that identity shift this weekend, man. And I think it starts with being way more aggressive in the passing game.
There was something that Marcus Freeman said during his press conference, Ryan, that if again, I don't put a lot of stock into press conferences, but I will just say, I'm going to say this. He made a comment that he was referring to Tobias Merriweather, and he says, we talked about this today in our meeting. We have to try and find ways to get him the ball and take some shots down the field with Tobias's body, length, and speed. We have to try and continuously find ways to truly take shots and not look for the wide open, perfect play. That's what at times we can end up doing. We have to take shots and believe he'll make a play on a 50-50 ball. We have to have full faith that he will. And it's not even just Tobias. This needs to be more of what just they're doing in general. It's take that one-on-one shot to Jaden Greathouse on 3rd and 6 against USC, right? And my hope is that the last few series we saw from the offense, the shot to Rico, they ran a play action looking to get a corner route for a touchdown on that next play. You've got the post route to Chris Tyree on the touchdown. You hope that we see more of that. Like, hey, look, guys, let's take a shot. Let's be aggressive. Let's put this game away. And my hope is that that's a sign of things to come. And then when you talk about what Coach Freeman said about, look, it's that right there, Ryan. It's you're always looking for that perfect play. And if it's not there, I'm just going to take the quick route or the short route or the check down or whatever. And it's almost kind of like they've overcorrected Sam Hartman. Now it's about, to what you broke down earlier, let's find that happy medium. Yeah. Because if you just go out there and have a 3 turnover game against one of these teams, you can get yourself beat, right? Sure. So I'm not looking for that. But you also can't average what they've done the last 4 games, which is 6.9 yards per pass attempt. Can't do that either. And, their best passing game so far of the last 4 games is 7.4 yards per attempt against Duke. That's it. They were 6.3 against USC. Like, I get that one to a degree, but still, even when you're being conservative, Ryan, 6.3 per attempt against a team like USC is just not going to get it done.
It's not.
And so they're going to have to be willing to say, hey, look, give that guy a shot. And if he doesn't catch it, he doesn't catch it. It's no different than throwing a check down and the guy gets tackled at the line of scrimmage, right? Like, let's take some chances, because if you hit a couple, then all of a sudden Pitt gets put in a predicament. Or you do to Pitt what they did in 2015 when they said, hey, we're going to shut down the run game. I know they got Will Fuller, but we're going to shut down the run game, and Notre Dame just made him pay for it. You've got to make him pay for it. That's going to be a big key. Same thing with Clemson. You think Clemson's going to sit back in their base defense again this year after what happened to them last year? Nope. They're going to have, they're going to be getting their pride questioned all week. They're going to be getting challenged all week. They're going to be coming off 2 tough games. You think that they're not going to be like, man, we are not letting Notre Dame run on us like that again. No way. Right. So what do you got to do? Take advantage of that. And that's going to be a big part of it.
Well, there's a couple different ways to achieve balance as an offense, right? One way is to get the run game going and then get one-on-one opportunities outside and then to make those plays. And then all of a sudden the defense is like, oh, snap, son, I don't know how to stop this. The other way is to come out throwing the football and then to loosen up that box and then get it going that way. Both ways can work. However you want to do it is however you want to do it. I actually don't care which way you want to do it as long as that happens. What I think has happened here, Brian, is that Notre Dame was a good running football team early in the year. They got the box loose. And then when they got into the tough part of the schedule, they weren't able to make teams pay with their passing game. So now teams are like, cool, you can run the ball. You're still going to be able to run the ball a little bit, but like, I don't care about your outside go route right now. Like, I don't care about it, right? Like, we're going to play man on man and we're not going to sacrifice numbers. And if you make a play, good for you. But until you show us you can make a play, we are not going to respect that element of the offense. Mm-hmm. That is what's happened. So for me, I don't like overcorrection all the time, but like, if I'm Notre Dame right now, I'm coming out of the bye week and being like, that's what the defense's perspective is. You know what I can do now? Let's try the opposite here. Let's get the passing game going. So now that we can achieve balance, the reverse, because not only is the passing game suffering, it also makes the running game suffer a little bit. You're not going to be as efficient of a running offense when you don't have a passing attack that is consistently a point of emphasis and a thing that can hurt a defense. They're just not going to respect it as much. And I think that's what you're seeing with like the yard per carry average for Notre Dame and the rushing performance of the last few games as well, is that when you don't respect a passing attack, you are not going to put the resources out to respect it. You are going to keep those in the box and make the running game have to methodically beat you if they can beat you at all. And so I think it's hurting not only the passing game, but also the running attack for Notre Dame and the offensive line in that sense as well.
Let me give you some numbers, Ryan.
Yep.
I talked about the pass game, right? Gave you those 6.9 yards per pass attempt the last 4 games, only 11.6 yards per catch. Both are bottom of the national rankings numbers if they were over the course of a season. Ground attack the last 4 games, 126 yards per game. Last 4 games. Even if you take out the Louisville game, which was the anomaly, which was 44 yards, even if you take that out, they're only averaging 153 yards per play, per carry, and they're under 5 yards per attempt. Or, excuse me, they're 153 yards per game, and they're about 4.6 yards per carry, even if you take the Louisville game out. If you add the Louisville game, which happened, you're at 3.9 yards per attempt. And to your point, there's issues within the run game, which we'll kind of transition into next, that need to get addressed. But a big part of it is your run game has no protection. You're back to where you were a year ago. But unlike a year ago, when Notre Dame could still go out and find ways to run the football in some weeks, like they were very up and down, this year, in the last 4 games especially, there have been no ups. It's just downs. Yeah. You could argue the Ohio State game was pretty good. And I think 176 yards against Ohio State.
The second half especially, yeah.
Yeah, yep. I mean, they was it like 123 or something like that in the second half. Yeah. You got it going. But the last 3 games, you just haven't been able to find your way. There's issues. The O-line's got to play better in the run game. That's the biggest thing for me. O-line's got to play better. You got to get back to being a little bit more diverse with your run game, but also being willing to be more aggressive attacking downhill. Just everything got slow, with the run game the last, 3-4 games. Be able to get back to some quick hitters, figure out who your dudes are, get them the football. The run game's got to get going in the last 4 games, Ryan. But to your point, to kind of put a bow on the first part of that conversation, it's going to be hard to really get it going against the better defenses. And your first 2 defenses you play are pretty good run defenses.
Yeah,
You've got to protect the run game more. And Notre Dame's pass game isn't able to do that. Hasn't been able to do that really the last month of the season, and that's going to have to change. And Pitt especially is going to say, you're not running on us. We're not going to let you run on us. You're going to have to beat us throwing the football. And Notre Dame's going to have to prove that they can. Now, can Notre Dame beat Pitt without playing well offensively? Sure. We've seen Pitt lose games because their offense is not very good. If the Notre Dame defense does what it's been doing all year, Pitt's not going to score much. But does that really make you feel like you grew as a football team, that you took advantage of? No, it doesn't. It doesn't. But the run game too, Ryan, the offensive line is a big question mark. Can Joe Rudolph get this group going coming out of the bye? That's a big question mark for me as well. And I don't care who plays. I mean, again, we have our opinions about that. That's not the point. Whoever he plays, can he get this unit going? The offensive line has probably been the big. A lot of people talk, harp on the receivers and all that, but the offensive line the last 3 weeks has been the biggest disappointment for me. Because if you actually break the film down, and I'm curious of what your thoughts are on this, Ryan. There's a lot more open guys against Louisville and USC than you all might think, but the ball wasn't able to come out because, the quarterback was clearly feeling the pressure the last couple games, and rightfully so. So the offensive line is going to have to play better, and it needs to manifest itself in the run game especially.
Well, the offensive line's been so weird, Brian, because usually it's offensive line, a couple new starters. First couple games, you're getting your footing. You're starting to really kind of understand one another next to you, work cohesively. And then in the middle of the season, you really start to hit your stride, and then you peak to the end of the season, right? Like exponential growth is what you usually see from an offensive line perspective. We haven't seen that at all this year. It's been very up and down, which is just strange. Like that typically doesn't happen for offensive line because it's been relatively outside of the weird shuffling in the Louisville game, right? Like it's been pretty consistent as far as who the starters are and who are the guys that are getting a lot of reps. Like we know who they are. And for whatever reason, it's like played great against Ohio State, played great against Navy, not so great against Tennessee State, bad against Louisville. Like, it's just been so up and down, and it just doesn't make much sense based upon what you typically see from how offensive lines mature. Because I think what's happening is you have a couple new players that are been very volatile and very up and down from a week to week perspective. And I think that's really hurting the cohesiveness of this offensive line as a unit. Like, I'm seeing Joe Alt show warts the last couple of weeks, right? Where it's just like, is that actually a Joe Alt issue fully? Or is that just maybe there's not enough trust in what's happening next to him and having to maybe freelance a little bit and to help out a little bit more than maybe he's typically used to compared to the last couple years. So I think that this offensive line in general, you need to figure out what the best mix is. And whoever Coach Rudolph figures out to that to be, if it's the same guys he's been rolling with pretty much the entirety of the year, that's cool. That's fine. As long as it gets better, right? But like, the biggest thing for me is that you cannot hurt the good parts of your offensive line if you are being very stagnant and stubborn with potentially making a decision to make an offensive line better. Like, you can't get stuck in your ways, because that's that same middle ground I talked about earlier, as far as like the middle ground of uncertainty, where it's like, maybe there should be a change that happens, but this is what I'm used to. This is what I'm comfortable with. And then you get into this weird middle ground where it's like no growth happens because you didn't make a decision one way or the other. You were just kind of stuck in the middle. And I think that Notre Dame, for me in general, whoever they throw out there, they need to play better, because right now it's about the best five up front as far as how they can all work together and be a cohesive unit. Right now, I think Joe Alt's play over the last couple games is suffering a little bit because of the offensive line issue in general. I think Blake Fisher has been very volatile again this year because of the uncertainty around him. I think that Zeke Correll has been a little bit volatile from a game-to-game perspective. The offensive line in general needs to grow up this week. They need to grow up down the stretch, because they are going to be the key for long-term success, right? We can talk about the quarterback all we want, and the quarterback is very, very important. It's the number one position in sports. But Notre Dame is a team that's always going to be built up around the offensive line, and the offensive line is always a quarterback's best friends. Because even the worst quarterbacks, if you give them time to find and go through their reads and go through their progressions and not make sure that there's no threat upon them, and you're able to run the football and keep defenses off balance, you're always going to be in a pretty good situation. So I think this offensive line need some maturation this week, man. They need to figure out an identity themselves, and they need to start working as a cohesive unit, because I don't think they've been a cohesive unit throughout the entirety of this year. Absolutely not.
I think you nailed it with the lack of cohesiveness, Ryan, because the one complaint we've had after games is it's always like one or two guys on each play, and it's a different guy on almost every play. It's not like, hey, Pat Coogan has sucked, put in Billy Schrauth. At times, Pat Coogan has not been very good. At times, he is good. And that's within games, not even just game to game, but just series to series. And you're just like, okay, this series, Pat was good and Rocco struggled. This series, the two guards were fine and Zeke struggled. This series, Joe Alt gave up a pressure, and Blake Fisher's whiffing on guys. And we're going to learn a lot about Joe Rudolph as an offensive line coach coming out of this stretch, because if he's the offensive line coach that's worthy of being at Notre Dame, he's going to, with the talent he has, he's going to be able to push the right buttons. And if you don't, I got to start asking myself, Ryan, is he the guy to get this line to play to its potential? Because it's not a lack of tools. I mean, I'm sorry, your offensive line coach does not have a lack of tools to work with for the next 4 games. And if he does, then that's great. And he's still learning these players, because, we're in that first year coach. You're learning guys like we talked about Al Golden last year, now Washington last year. And there's always a learning process for first year coaches. Same with Harry Hiestand last year. It's why they struggled out of the gate, but you could just see the steady growth last season from the O-line.
Exactly.
And then there'd be like a little setback and then back to growth. We haven't seen that from the line this year. We need to see that. Yeah. And, we'll find out. And then the last thing, Ryan, just briefly, is they got to get back to getting some big plays. That's going to be important, not just because it shows the offense is growing and maturing, but it's going to be very important to winning your next 2 football games. You're going to have to generate some big plays, run game and pass game. This isn't just throwing the ball down the field. This is getting back to where you're able to gash teams running and throwing. And that's going to be a big part. And all the things we discussed kind of lead into that if the execution is there, if you make the adjustments, if you're able to get your skill players the football in the right situations, build the offense around them, play well up front, and then just let your quarterback, just turn them loose, man. Let them go play football. Your offense is going to rip off some big plays. If you don't, and you just keep trying, because like what I do, worst case scenario, Ryan, let's just keep doing what we're doing. Just get a little better at it. Like if Marcus Freeman truly believes the only issue on offense has been a lack of execution, then not a lot's going to change.
Yeah,
it's not. I don't think that's what he's saying. I have not taken what he's saying is that he thinks that's the only problem. I'm just saying, like, if that's all you think, this is more of a general statement. We've talked about this with Brian Kelly after 2015. We just got to coach a little better and play a little harder. Do you think that's what kept you from winning a championship this year? No, it's because you have a terrible defensive coordinator. Your strength program's a hot mess, and you've got these other issues that you're not addressing, and he didn't address them, right? So this coaching staff's going to have to address those issues, and if they do, they push the right buttons, a natural manifestation will be the big plays come back more, in my opinion, on offense.
Well, I think that for me, offensively, and this is just a general thing. This isn't even an offensive thing, but there's always going to be those moments in football games or a game in general where you're going to have a struggle, right? As far as maybe things aren't working the right way, maybe you're just a tick slow, maybe there's adjustments that are needed. But what can fix that very quickly and get an offense jump started is a big play, man. Create a big play, and that takes kind of pressure off a little bit, and it opens it up, and it gets guys feeling good about themselves. You need those big plays, man. You need them. I mean, whether it's Chris Tyree, Tobias Merriweather, Audric Estime,
Let me ask you a
Jeremiah
question,
Love.
Ryan. I want to ask you a question about that. You're a
Yep.
defensive guy. You played linebacker. What
Yep.
goes through your head when you're playing a team and in the first few series they've ripped off a couple big gains? Now, I've always felt like as a coach, it puts defensive team units on their heels. Like that's the other thing to me is you're not just giving yourself confidence, you're instilling doubt. Like what the heck is going on here right
Right.
now on the other side of the ball? Am I right on that from a defensive players and defensive coaches standpoint?
Well, I think defensive players always want to feel comfortable with what they're reading, right? So anytime there's a big play, it's usually, I mean, there's always the occasion of like your best player just beat our best player because he's also a good football player. But in most cases, there's some sort of miscommunication, whether you're a gap short in the run game, whether someone is in the wrong coverage so that there's an open spot in a defense and from a coverage perspective. So I think that the uncertainty kind of mixes into your mind defensively, right? I still think that the worst thing defensively is when you just cannot stop the run because you're just getting whooped,
Sure.
right? Because it's demoralizing. But there's nothing that makes you feel more uncertain than when there's just a couple plays that keep popping open and where you're just like, where's that guy's going? Like, where are we supposed to be there?
And this is why the pass game is so important. Because
Yep.
big plays in the pass game usually come from some sort of either I just got beat one-on-one or there was some sort of design that got a guy free that creates issues. You start getting those pass plays going. Then all of a sudden, less guys in the box. Now we start leaning on you in the run game. And now you're, okay, they're doing all these things. They're moving. They're doing all this. They're running these post-snap switches. They're doing all this. We're having some issues with execution, and they're running it down our throat. Like,
Right.
that's who Notre Dame needs to be, and that's not who they've been. And
No.
that's where you can create problems. So it's not just about confidence for you. It's also about instilling doubt and creating confusion, getting the defense on their heels. That's going to be a big key. And if the offense can do these things and they can answer these questions affirmatively, how are they going to bring the big plays back? What are they going to do to get the offensive line playing better, which is going to impact the run game? What are they going to do to get the pass game back on track? Those are
Yep.
all things we're going to find out, and the how well those questions get answered is going to determine, Ryan, if this offense can play to its potential. Because if the offense plays to its potential, I mean, we're going to talk about the defense a little bit, but it's going to be a much shorter conversation. Because
Yep.
this is the side of the ball that to me is to the most degree is going to tell us that this staff has what it takes to make the adjustments and self scout, self analyze, look in the mirror, and say, okay, we got to do this to get this thing going, and we know how to get it going. That's going to be the key.
Right. Yep. Notre Dame needs a big shift offensively, and I think that starts this week. There's no doubt about it. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of question marks, and those are obviously some of the key things that we'll be looking for this week when they take on Pitt. Defensively, Brian, I think for me, I mean, as we start this conversation, it's been mostly very good defensively,
Yeah.
right? I mean, there's been so many great performances this year. I mean, obviously, the recent one that Notre Dame just had against USC is still fresh in everyone's mind as far as holding it, the team that was averaging over 50 points a game to only 20 points, forcing Caleb Williams into 3 interceptions, his worst outing of his career, literally his worst outing. Only the second time he ever had multi-interception game, and the first one came when he was a true freshman against Baylor. First game ever though with 3 interceptions in a football game. You mix that in with the entirety of the season. I mean, it's littered with good performances. You know, you held Ohio State to 17 points. You have really been a team that can rely on that defense, and they've given an opportunity for Notre Dame to win every football game. So, we're going to talk about a couple of things that we want to see fixed, but I think the biggest point of emphasis here is that there needs to be just keep doing what you're doing, man. Just stay focused. Don't mess it up. Like you're in a good spot
Right.
right now, man. Don't be
Right.
too just keep doing what you're doing, man. Maintain. You have something that is sustainable, in my opinion. Just keep working it and keep refreshing it and keep just making sure that everything is good to go here.
Even if, Ryan, they simply do what they did the first 4 games and don't turn the D-line loose the way that they have against Duke and USC, it's still good enough to shut down the next 4 teams you're going to play. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And so when we talk about this big picture, Ryan, it's this right here. It's like you said, stay focused. Don't look at because here's the problem. Here's the concern, Ryan. They can look at the schedule and be like, okay, Pitt's scoring 24.6 per game. Here's the scary thing. Pitt has the second best offense that Notre Dame is going to face the next 4 games from a points per game. The team with the best offense they're going to face the next 4 games, Clemson.
Yep.
Like that's not good, right?
Yeah.
And Clemson is scoring under 30 points per game this year against Power 5 teams because they're only at, I think, 30.2. Let me look it up here real quick, Ryan. I know they're barely over 30 on the season. And part of that is they're 30.4. So I was slightly off. But here's the deal. They scored 66 against Charleston Southern, who is terrible at the FCS level. Or at least they have been. I don't know if I should say that because I don't know what their record is this year. I know that they got rid of Coach Denson. I don't know if they're any better this year than they have in the past. They're 3-3. They're a 3-3
I don't think
FCS
they're very
team.
good either. Yeah.
Yeah, they lost to Western Carolina. Western Carolina scored 11 more points than Clemson did. I mean, they beat them 77-21. Okay.
Yeah.
So they're not a very good defensive football team. And you take that out, and all of a sudden Clemson's just not a very good scoring football team. And you and I were going over some stats before the show started. And if you look at just scoring numbers against FBS teams, because Pitt, their 24.6 is inflated by the fact they scored 45 against Wofford. But if you look at the scoring points per game of their opponents against Power 5 teams, Clemson or Pitt is at 21.2. Clemson is at 24.5. Wake Forest is at 20.8. And Stanford is at 21.0. Like I'm looking at the stats now. Clemson ranked 77th, and then 3 in a row. Pitt at 101, tied for 101. Stanford at 103, Wake at 104. They're all averaging 24.5 points or less against Power 5 teams. So the only way you give up points to these 3 teams is if you lose focus. You're not as locked in. You see that the opponent stinks. You get away. You start being sloppy, missed tackles, blown assignments, not doing what you're supposed to do because you're not as keyed in because you're not playing Caleb Williams. You're not playing Ohio's Marvin Harrison. You're not playing Riley Leonard. You're not playing this big play Louisville offense. You're not as locked in, and you allow an inferior opponent to make plays, which we have seen from this team this year, Ryan. We saw that against Central Michigan. That's exactly what we saw against Central Michigan. So that's why that you're spot on with that first point, Ryan, which is stay focused, stay locked in, do what you've been doing. Because even if you just do what you've done all year, you're shutting these next 4 opponents down. You are.
Yep.
Because I haven't looked at any of those teams of like, that team's numbers aren't good, but they're starting to get hot. Right? Because you could have said maybe Stanford of what they did against Colorado, but then you're like, no, they played a real defense the next week and couldn't do anything. When they played UCLA, who, by the way, quick side note, they have been very good on defense this year. People are not talking enough about the job that the UCLA coaching staff is doing on defense, by the way. They're only giving up 14.9 points per game right now.
Well, they have a defensive end that's going to go in the first round, barring medicals.
Yeah,
Layatu,
Sepulveda kid. Yeah,
Latu. Yeah, they have the
yeah.
Murphy twins that are good football players as well. So they got some guys there, man.
Right.
I did notice that Dante Moore got benched though for
I
Ethan
did see that.
Garbers.
I did
That
see
was a
that.
little
But
not great.
But looking at Stanford, they had the 49. They
Yep.
had the 46 points against Colorado,
Yep.
and they're still only averaging 21 points a game against Power 5 teams because they scored
Yep.
37 against Hawaii, 10 against USC, 20 against Arizona, 6 against Oregon, 7 against UCLA. So again, these are not good. We're not going to lie to y'all and tell y'all, hey, this team's dangerous. Yeah, this team's dangerous if you have Colorado's defense. Sure.
And I think Ashton Daniels got hurt in that football game
Yeah.
too for Stanford. So like, yeah.
He at least has a live arm. I mean, you can at least give
Yep.
him that.
Yep.
But it's just that guys, they're just not good. Right?
Yep.
They're just not good offenses. So as long as you do what you do, you should shut them down. But it's beyond that, Ryan. And this is what we talked about before. It's not just shutting down bad offenses. Are making sure you're not developing bad habits, making sure you're not going away from what is you. And this is the ultimate test for what Marcus Freeman says is we can't worry about the opponent. We got to worry about Notre Dame. Can Al Golden, Al Washington, Chris O'Leary, Mike Mickens, Max Bulla get these guys locked in and ready to focus on excelling when they know the opponent's not good.
Yep.
That's part of leadership. I think with a veteran team, you're gonna see more of that. I'm less concerned about that than I might be next year against some inferior opponents when Notre Dame's gonna be a lot younger on defense, very talented, but a lot younger. I believe they're going to be focused, but that's the key. That's the biggest question in the second half, Ryan. Honestly, we guys, we could give you all types of, and we've got a couple specific things, Ryan. There's one thing I needed to add that I forgot to add to that. But there's a couple areas where I'd like to see some improvement. But at the end of the day, it's just guys, just do what you're doing, right?
Yep.
Because these teams aren't good. These teams aren't good offensively. There's some good defenses now that could create some problems, get their offensive short fields and all that. But offensively, it's just not good, which kind of gets you fired up, Ryan, about maybe where this Notre Dame could end up. This Notre Dame defense could end up at the end of the year from a ranking standpoint. Yeah. Because you're going to the stretch where you're playing the worst offenses you're going to face. Notre Dame right now is 14th in scoring so far this season. They're 12th in total defense. They're only giving up 283 yards per game. And right now they are 11th in yards per play. So if they do what they should do in these next 4 games, you're talking about a Notre Dame defense is going to rank in the top 10 in almost every major statistical defensive category. And I kind of want to see that. Like, so where's that pride? Have some say, hey guys, this isn't about Pitt. This is about us. And if we want to be who we are, then let's go out and shut that down. And I feel like that's kind of what the great defenses do. It doesn't matter about the opponent. What the scoreboard's what matters, right? We don't want to let them get a point. Okay, they're not good. Good. Then there's no excuse to let them score. That kind of mentality. I want to see if they can have that. That's going to be Ryan, if they do that, all the other stuff will take care of itself because of the quality of the offenses that they're playing.
Man, if they get top 10 too, I might have to make a hashtag Fire Al Golden shirt for everyone out there in the Twitterverse that tells me he's still terrible.
If he was a real coordinator, they'd be top 5. Yeah,
exactly right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's obviously joking around about it, but like, it's what we're seeing from this Al Golden defense this year is that it is sustainable because it is happening just about every week. I mean, you could talk about Louisville getting some things going in the second half, but like they'd only given up 7 points at halftime. Notre Dame had a chance to put that game away, and the offense let the defense down in that football game. I mean, it's been very dependable this year for the most part. The defense is going to come to play. They're going to do a really good job. And yeah, I mean, when we're talking about against Pitt, all due respect, they should have a game. They should have another very good showing defensively. Of course, there's always things you want to improve on. It's never going to be perfect. There's always going to be wrinkles. There's always going to be adjustments. But yeah, man, sustainability is what I'm looking for on defense because I think you have a winning formula on the defensive side of the football right now. I think you have. You always talk about championship caliber, right, Brian? I think that Notre Dame has been a championship caliber defense this year. I believe they've been a championship caliber defense. And I think it's been sustainable as well, which matters to me.
And in 2 of the last 3 games, we saw a recipe that can really work, which is that really aggressive, let your D-line be your first line of attack mentality. You did that against Duke. It worked great. You did that against USC. It worked great. It can work great these next 4 games. There are 2 areas, however, Ryan, that are very targeted for I want to see improvement. And it's run game and third down defense. Those are the 2. run game wise, this has been the if you're going to say what has hey you guys, the defense isn't perfect. What are the things they need to go better? Run defense, that flat out, because we Notre Dame's pass defense has been elite this season. They rank 52nd in the country in rush defense. And here's the thing: you can't say, well, that's because they played a triple option team. They held Navy below what Notre Dame's currently giving up 129.9 rushing yards per game. They held Navy to 126. It's not because of Navy. It's because you gave up $189 to Duke, so you gave up $185 to Louisville. That's what it comes down to. You've got to fix those performance. And Ohio State didn't run for a lot of yards, but you did have that one big long play. You got to eliminate that. They've been very good at times this season. I thought the first 4 games they were pretty good on defense, run defense. Central Michigan was a little bit up and down, but you were very good running in your run defense against USC. So they've shown the ability to be that type of team. They've got to do that these last 4 games. That's going to be a big key because, again, you're talking about teams that aren't exactly lighting the world on fire running the football. Pitt ranks 119th running the football this year. Against Power 5 teams, Ryan, they're only averaging 94 yards per game running the football. Clemson ranks 67th. They're only averaging 147.7. Only 3.9 per carry. These are against Power 5 teams. Wake Forest is your best running team that you're going to play so far. Think about that. Wake Forest at 153 yards per game against Power 5 teams, 3.6 per carry. That's the best run defense you're going to face. Stanford is 97th with 118.7. Those are their numbers against Power 5 teams, by the way. So I'm just trying to put into context what those teams have done. And a lot of that for Stanford was because they ran all over USC for 209. Their last 4 games, 108 to Arizona, 89 to Oregon, 124 against Colorado, 24 yards against UCLA. So you have a chance to get right run game wise. We need to see them do that. This is a chance for them to get that part of their game going. And it's got to be right. It can't just be yards. It's got to be, why are you stopping them? Is it because their backs stink or their O-line stinks? Or are you more sound? Are you more aggressive? Are you turning your D-line loose? Are you tackling it better in space? All those type of things are going to be limiting the big plays. Because like Louisville and Duke, it was more so the big plays that hurt Notre Dame. It wasn't they were just consistently gashing them. It was the big plays. Louisville a little bit late when Notre Dame was kind of just worn out. But early on, it was the big plays. And you've got to be able to limit those, but just the create more negatives, all those. That's probably a big part of the run game I want to see, Ryan, against these teams. I want to see them do a better job of being more disruptive. That's going to be something that I would really like to see as part of this run game. More run game TFLs is what I'm looking for.
Yeah. Well, I think in a lot of the underwhelming performances defensively we've seen over the last couple of years, I think that the inability to stop the run has been kind of mixed in with why it got to that point, right? I mean, I don't think it's any coincidence that if you're not able to stop the run very well, your defense doesn't play at its peak form and it doesn't play at its best, right? I mean, that's kind of, again, we always talk about sustainability. That's like it's one of the key. I mean, honestly, if you ask most defensive coordinators, like, what's the number one objective this week? It's stop the run, control the line of scrimmage. Like always, that's a prerequisite to playing defensive football for the most part, right? So I think that you need to, because what's the one way, Brian, that a pesky Pitt team can stick around for a while? If out of nowhere, the Hammond and Sebo Flemister are like getting good games where you're just like, why are they sustaining drives? Like, why is this happening right now? So yeah, man, if you're able to shut down the run games of these last 4 opponents, we talk about why it matters long term. Well, just for the next 4 games, you have a chance to close these games out early too, man. I'm here to tell you guys, because we'll get into Pitt here next, in a little bit here, but Pitt, if you just completely shut down their run game early on and make them have to try to be a passing offense, you're going to kill Pitt. Like, you're going to destroy them. They do not function that well. They had Phil Dracovic, who was barely averaging over 50% completion. They replaced him with the kid that came from Penn State that's a little bit better than Phil at 53% completion percentage. Like, they're not a good passing offense. Right. They're just not, right? So stopping the run is going to be very indicative of just how dominant you can be over this 4-game stretch.
Yeah. Ryan, just to give you some numbers, I'm doing a lot of numbers today. You look at the 4 teams you're going to play down the stretch, their tackles, where they rank in the nation in tackles for loss allowed. Pitt right now ranks 81st. Clemson ranks 90th. Wake Forest ranks tied for last with Marshall 132nd, and Stanford ranks 125th. So again, the recipe is there for your football team to get rolling. And that's where Notre Dame's got to be. And so I want to see what they're able to do when it comes to being more disruptive, because the recipe is there. And then the other part that I want to see from this Notre Dame football team down the stretch too is the third down defense has got to get a lot better. That's been to me, even more so than the run game, because like the run game has been good at times. It's been bad at times. It's been solid most of the year. Now it needs to be really good down the stretch. The third down defense has even been a problem in some of the games where overall you played well. I mean, like there have been times when you look at the numbers and you're like, man, Notre Dame, right now they rank 75th in third down defense, but you're like, even in some of the games they did, like, I thought they played really well against Ohio State defensively, but Ohio State completed 58.8% of their third downs. That was the game right there, because they converted a couple on that last drive. They converted a 3rd and 10, a 3rd and 19. USC, as good as Notre Dame was against USC still converted 46.2% of their third downs.
Yeah.
And NC State went 8 of 19. And they had a stretch where they made a little bit of a rally. It's because they weren't able to get off the field. So it hasn't been a very good third down defense really all year. This is your chance to kind of get that part of your game going. And this is going to be a key, because this is not just about this one, for example, Ryan, to me, is not just about getting right. Or, I mean, just getting better statistically. This is a part of your game that when you get into the postseason is going to be a big part of what's going to allow you to go out there and have some success winning football games if you're able to get into a big time opponent. Clemson's the only team that ranks inside the top 70 in third down offense against FBS opponents. They're like 38th. The rest of them are 70th or lower. So it's another part that you can get right, but it's also about, okay, but what's your plan? Are they just shutting down teams that aren't good? Are they making the adjustments? Because that's kind of part of this too is, yeah, you need to just kind of keep doing what you're doing, but there do need to be some little tweaks here and there in these two areas, run game wise and third down wise, to say, hey, look, let's limit the big plays in a run game, because if they clean up the big plays, they're fine. I mean, I think they're fine. And then third down, getting better at those two areas, this defense is going to be. I mean, that's how it's been very good, Ryan. It hasn't been elite. It can be elite if you can improve in those two areas, because if it comes down to teams have to throw the ball on you, they're done. Ohio State couldn't do it. USC couldn't do it. I promise you none of these next 4 teams are going to do it if Notre Dame is playing their game.
Agree. If you turn Pitt, if you turn Stanford, if you turn Wake Forest, if you turn even Clemson into a pure passing team, it's not going to be successful, right? Like I think about Clemson, it's like they need Will Shipley, they will need Phil Moffitt to be the drivers, and then to be Cape Klubnik to be the guy that works great off of those things, and to be complements to each other. If you can't complement one another, then you have the ability to, I think, make some statements over the course of the season. It's all going to be about coaches stepping up, players stepping up, and we'll be able to see that obviously moving forward here, Brian. So I think Notre Dame defensively, talk about sustainability, a couple tweaks that you make, and you have a chance to be an elite defense to finish out 2023. You have a chance to be in that conversation. So
that helps with recruiting, that helps with momentum, that helps with a lot of things. And so I'd love to see it. So that's where it is defense. It's just keep doing what you're doing and improve in these two areas, and you're going to be pretty special. And they'll continue to give this team I honestly, Ryan, I'm not worried about that. Like, we need to see it, right? I mean, football is a show me business, right? But I'm not sitting here thinking like, man, Ryan, I'm really worried about this defense, because Al Golden has, whether you like it or not, it's the approach has been consistent as far as this is who he is. Now, they've made some alterations in certain games that I think have worked, and I want to see them continue building on that. But it's not like last year was almost like dial a defense from week to week. You can see carryover week to now. There are always new adjustments to different teams, but you can see I know who they want to be this year. Where last year was almost like he was trying to be an NFL coach. We're just going to put in a new scheme every week, and it sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. This year, there's been more of a foundation we've seen.
Yeah.
And when you consider that, plus the fact that 10 of their 11 starters on defense are seniors, 5th-year seniors, or 6th-year seniors, with the exception being Benjamin Morrison.
Right.
Like,
Right.
there's the maturity that you expect for this group to say, hey, for a lot of these guys, this is their last hurrah. Like, we know DJ Brown's done. I mean, he
Yep.
can't play anymore if he wanted to at Notre Dame. Javante Jean-Baptiste. If you're the fifth-year seniors at linebackers, if you're Howard Cross, Riley Mills, Cam Hart,
Yep.
maybe they come back, maybe they don't. But, they're gonna, I think, gonna be hungry. So I'm not concerned about the defense. I fully expect them to do what we're talking about. My big questions still remain: will the offense do that? I'm
Yep.
fully confident. Now we need to see it, but I'm fully confident that the Notre Dame defense is going to do what they need to do to go out there and play big time football down the stretch, player wise and coach wise.
Yep, I agree. There are not a lot of question marks about the defense. Just about keep doing what you're doing, and are you able to just not get out of your own way, right? Don't get in your own way and down the stretch here. So that's Notre Dame offense, Notre Dame defense coming out of the bye week. Things that we want to see now going into the last 4-game stretch here, starting with Pitt this Saturday. Next, we will start into our Pitt preview, where we'll be breaking down what you should expect offensively, defensively from the Pitt Panthers. So Pittsburgh's kind of a weird team, huh, Brian?
Yeah.
A little bit weird. I mean, we're going to show a lot of stats here offensively and defensively where I'm just kind of like, I watched film on them the last couple of days. I watched like 4 games, I think, on the All-22, and I'm just like, dang, man, like, I'm not really sure what I just watched fully.
Right.
Like, like there's some things I liked, some things I hated. And then you look at the numbers, I'm just like, I'm not sure exactly if that's what I saw in film, but like it's there, So very peculiar team, I think, to open up this conversation.
Yeah. And a really struggling team. I mean, Pat Narduzzi's done a heck of a job with Pitt the last couple of years. I mean, 2 years ago, obviously Pitt was the ACC champs with Kenny Pickett. Beat Sam Hartman and Wake Forest in the ACC title game. And a bit of an ironic twist that they lost the final game of that season against Michigan State. But that season they beat Tennessee that year. They blew out Georgia Tech, blew out Virginia Tech, beat Clemson by 10 that year, blew out Duke, blew out Syracuse, went on, smashed Wake Forest in the ACC title game and finished 11-3. And Kenny Pickett becomes first round pick. And they lost a lot of players off that team. Yeah. And they come out last year, and all of a sudden, some new guys emerged. The Cansey kid became a big-time D tackle. They had some other guys emerge. The running back kind of comes out and has a big-time year, and you're just like,
I love Izzy Abaconda.
Yeah, and you're like, where the heck did this kid come from? He was like a 600-yard rusher. He was splitting carries with Vincent Davis and Rodney Hammond, and then he comes out last year, and he's one of the better running backs in college football last season. And then he rushes for 1,400 yards and only plays 11 games. Yeah, and has a big time year. He breaks out, and you just really liked what Pitt did. Things started off poorly for them. They barely beat West Virginia. If you remember that game, JT Daniels threw a pick late in the game to help Pitt seal it. They lost to Virginia, or Tennessee. Actually competed against Tennessee. I mean, it was a much more competitive game than people thought. 3 weeks later, they lose at home to Georgia Tech, who is not good. They get blown out by Louisville. They get blown out by North Carolina. And they're sitting there at 4-4, and you're just like, this could get ugly. They got Miami coming up. They got Duke coming up, who's a good football team. They got to play at Virginia. Syracuse. They got to play Syracuse. Who's at the time was a good football team. This could get ugly, and they rattle five straight wins. They beat Syracuse by 10. They blow out Virginia. They beat a very good Duke team by 2, and then they went on the road to end the season and destroyed Miami, and then beat UCLA in the bowl game by 2. And great finish. Now, coming into this year, Ryan, they're struggling again out of the gate. So the question is, you've got to make sure when you look at Pitt, Ryan, that you don't allow them to kind of finish strong, because the last 2 years, if you look at their schedule, the last 2 years, Pitt has not lost a game in November. Yeah, the last 2 years. Now they've come in November with some 500-ish type of football teams, 6-2, 4-4, that type of deal. But they've played 8 football games the last 2 years in November and haven't lost any of them. So this is a football team that's going to be. And then actually, if you go back the last 3 years, the only game they've lost in November the last 3 years was to Trevor Lawrence and that 2020 Clemson team. So this is a team that finishes strong now, but unlike those other teams, Ryan, this team has some much bigger holes that I don't know that they're going to be able to fix in November. So, and when you look at their schedule, we'll just pull it up now, Ryan. You see what they've done so far this year. They beat Wofford to open the season 45-7, lost at home to Cincinnati by 6. Cincinnati's not good, as you can see. lost a really ugly game to West Virginia. Like neither team played well that game. Got beat at home by North Carolina. That's a very good North Carolina team. I know that they had a bad loss this week. That's still a good North Carolina team. The going on the road and getting smacked a little bit by Virginia Tech, Ryan, that was a bit of a concern. They did come out of their bye week pretty good, and obviously you have an upset win over a Louisville team that clearly was overlooking them and was still kind of riding that high from their upset victory over Notre Dame. Defense gets a late pick six. It's 24-21. Louisville's driving. Defense gets a late pick six and puts that game away. And then, of course, last week they lost to Wake Forest, and Wake Forest played their third-string quarterback. So, and the ending, did you finally go watch it, Ryan? Did you get a chance to watch the last minute of that game?
I did watch the last minute.
That was crazy. Crazy.
I forgot to text you about it because I was just like, what? I felt dumbfounded after I watched that last minute. I was just like, what the heck did I just watch? I felt like I was watching the Pitt games all year. I'm just like, wow, this is really weird. I don't know what's happening right now.
How do you lose that way? You needed a quarterback that doesn't know how to properly slide. Yeah. And his young kid, you have a punter that shanks a ball. I mean, they're just like everything that could have gone wrong in that. You let them convert a fourth down. It just everything that could have gone wrong went wrong for Pitt. You lose that game 21-17. I will say this about Pitt, Ryan. They're not a very good football team right now. They don't have a lot of talent. They have some at spots, but this is their least talented team last few years. But the one thing you know you're going to get with this team is they're going to be physical. They're going to play hard. And they're not going to lay down and die. And that's the thing that you know about Pat Narduzzi team. They're not going to quit. They're not. No. If you're gonna beat them, you're gonna have to earn that win. You're gonna have to earn that blowout. That's one thing that I will say. Despite all the other issues we'll talk about, that you will see.
Well, I have a good friend that was actually in the recruiting department at Pittsburgh a couple years ago, and I will say this, Brian, is I know we like to poke fun at Narduzzi because he says some things sometimes where you're just like, dude, stop talking in the media. But his players and his staff members, they love Pat Narduzzi. They love him. They'll play hard for him, man, and they always do, which is why I think they have an identity, right? And they have a lack of talent in certain spots. There's no doubt. Like the quarterback position is a mess this year. We'll talk about during this podcast. The offensive line is a mess this year. Defensively, there's some holes, especially at safety and at linebacker this year, in my opinion, compared to where they were last year, especially. But they still all play their tails off. Whatever reason, well, not for whatever reason, it's obviously because, one, I think Pat Narduzzi is liked by his players, no doubt. They play hard, and he has instilled a atmosphere and a philosophy around the Pitt program of we're going to scratch and crawl into the last possible seconds of the game. That's the culture, right? The culture. Yeah. And that's what's built off, and that's what you can depend on over there.
You may beat me in this fight, but I promise you're going to walk away limping. I promise you. You may get me in the end, but it's going to be a fight for your life. That's how Pitt plays. That's who they are. And you can expect that from Notre Dame when they play, especially expect that when they play Notre Dame this weekend, right? They're going to come in here, hey, guys, we got a chance to save our season. And they're going to be confident because, like, guys, we beat Louisville. Louisville beat Notre Dame. Now, that transitive property doesn't mean anything. We're talking about evaluating teams, but to individual players, a football team, human beings, they're going to look at that and say, if we beat them and they beat them, why can't we beat them? That's going to be their mindset. And so for Notre Dame, you're going to have to make sure that you remove that from their minds as quickly as possible. But Pitt's going to come in here ready to play, Ryan, physically. Now, will they be able to execute and make plays? That's a whole different question. But this team is going to come and punch you in the mouth on play one, and you got to be ready for it.
And you have to keep punching because, it's not just they're going to punch you. You got to punch back, and then they'll stop punching. Like, they're going to keep punching. Right. They are until the final whistle. And you have to, obviously, if you are able to counteract their physicality with physicality of your own, then that's when the talent takes over, right? Where you're like, okay, our guys are just more talented than your guys in the end. And that's going to be kind of the difference in the football game. But, yeah, man, I think that you can always depend on that about Pitt. They are always a very predictable team in the sense of identity. There's no doubt what they want to be. Even when they had Kenny Pickett at quarterback that 1 year where they were able to throw the ball better, they were still built around the same culture, right? The same culture of we're going to punch in the mouth. Defensively, we're not going to kill ourselves. We're going to play good, fundamentally sound. And that is the Pittsburgh culture. There's no doubt about that. Yeah. And I think that they also I think they get off on that a little bit, right? It's like they're from Pittsburgh, Steel City. They're under-recruited kids for the most part. Like, That's what they're built off of, and I respect that. I respect that
Yes.
wholeheartedly about Pitt.
Yes,
Excuse
because
me.
we're not saying this in a disrespectful manner, like, "Oh, they're a
No,
bunch of bums," but at least they play. No, it's like it's gonna be a dogfight. You got to be ready for that dogfight. Ryan, when you look at this team, you talked about them being a strange team, and they are. They're a very strange team, and you look at some of their numbers. I don't know that this late in the season I've ever seen a team that kind of looks like this. And let's begin with the offense because that's not strange. That's just kind of bad everywhere. They're not a very good offense. Now they have been a pretty good big play offense. There's the strange thing about them is they rank 88. Not strange. It's intriguing. They rank 88th in the country in scoring offense. They rank 14th in red zone offense. So what that means is when they get into the red zone, they're gonna score. The problem is they don't get into the red zone
Wins 'em a
offense
lot.
very often. They
Right.
are, as that stat shows, Ryan, they are 14th in the country in red zone offense overall. They're 17th in the country in red zone touchdown offense. So when they do get into the red zone, they get touchdowns. But as I said, they don't get into the red zone very often, Ryan. They at this point in time, Pitt ranks 128th in red zone trips, tied for 128th with Connecticut, Nevada, and Charlotte. So,
320 yards per game offensively is atrocious, folks. Like
yeah,
I know you're looking at the 115 next to it and being like, yeah, there's only 133 FBS teams, so like that's bad, obviously, but like 320 is bad, guys. Like that's
yeah,
really, really bad. So yeah, they don't sustain much. When they do
no,
though, and they get down into the red area, they're a decent football team.
yeah,
I guess is
they
the
have a
best way to
plan
put it.
down there. I mean, they
Yeah.
really do. They have a plan. I mean, when you look at their total offense, you see the number there. It's even worse against Power 5 teams or against FBS teams. They're 121st in the country. So when I give this stat, just so people understand, there's one of the places I go to for stats is cfbstats.com, and you can look at the national rankings, and then you can kind of, you can sort of look at games certain ways. You can look at versus ranked opponents versus non-ranked opponents versus FCS, versus winning teams with winning percentages versus Power 5, all that. I like to look at games against FBS opponents. And so that's one way to look at it. And when you look at Pitt, their total offense, and this is any game where the opponent is an FBS team. So like for Notre Dame, they take out the Tennessee State stats, and this is where they rank with Tennessee State removed. And so when you look at Pitt, it's with that Wofford game removed. So against Power 5 teams, Pitt ranks 121st. Now, the stats you all are looking at, those are just the raw stats. Or I mean, just with no context, just this is where everybody ranks. But just for some context in other situations, that's why I'm giving some of these first Power 5 opponents, because I think for Pitt, Ryan, it provides context because it shows that they had that one game where they did some really good things, but that's just not who they are. They're not a team that goes out there and gets 419 yards a game on offense, which they did against Wofford. Now they did hit some big plays against Wake, and they did have over 300 passing yards against Wake, but you had to throw the ball 45 times to get there. They were only 6.7 yards per attempt. So they're not a very good offense. They're not. They allow a lot of sacks. They allow a lot of tackles for loss. They can't stop the run, but at least they also, I mean, they can't run the football, but at least they also can't really throw the football. I mean, it just, but the one thing they do is two things they don't turn it over a lot, and they can hit some big plays in the pass game. Those are things that if you're Notre Dame, you've got to be concerned about because it leads to what you said earlier, Ryan. If you don't do what you need to do running the football, Pitt will get going, and they will move the ball and shorten. They want to shorten this game. They want to do to Notre Dame what Notre Dame did to Ohio State last year: limit possessions, shorten the game, and then if we can create some mistakes by that Notre Dame offense, all of a sudden we're sitting here. It's a 17-10 game in the fourth quarter. We got a shot. That's what Pitt wants to do. They want to make it that kind of game to where they can just be within striking distance at that one big play. Because I will say this, I felt about their receivers. It's not like a great receiving core, but they've got some kids that can, if you're not locked in, they got some kids that can make some plays down the field. And
I like
about
Kanate Mumfield, who's the transfer from Akron a couple years ago. I think is a pretty good football player. I know they have the other kid. What's it, Bub Means, who's another transfer as well.
Yeah, and their
And
tight
then
end's a big play guy, Ryan.
I like Gavin Bartholomew
yeah.
a lot, man. I think
Yeah.
he's a pretty good player.
He's averaging 18 yards a catch. Man, that's pretty good for a tight end.
It's very
So,
good.
they have some decent pass game weapons. They haven't been able to protect the quarterback, and they haven't been able to get the ball to those guys. And leading rusher, I want to say this on the season is Sebo Flemister, which I'm very happy for that kid. I like
Good for him.
Sebo as a young man. I'm happy that he's found a place where he can go play football. And he's coming off of a 100-yard game. Played very well against Wake Forest. Very well against Wake Forest. So
It's
very
good for him.
happy for Sebo. But just overall, Ryan, their offense is not good. We've seen this offense before recently. Their offensive coordinator is Frank Signetti Jr., who was the BC offensive coordinator when they played against BC in 2020 during the COVID year when they went to Boston College. So they have seen this offense before. It's schematically they know what to expect. It's just not a good offense, Ryan, and it really hasn't been all season. I mean, it hasn't been.
No efficiency to this offense at all. They have a low yard per carry average. Offensively, they do not complete a high percentage of passes at all. I guess the positive is they're not completing a ton of passes. At least they don't throw it to the other team much. I think they've only thrown 5 interceptions between the two quarterbacks, with Phil Dracovic included in that. So they don't kill themselves a lot, I guess, but like they also don't sustain drives very much either. So like it's weird, man. It's just a weird football team, because usually Pitt is a very good offensive team, or it's a very good offensive line, excuse me, that can run the football. Usually you can kind of hang your hats on that, especially last year is obviously a great indicator of that. But offensively, this offensive line is probably the worst Pitt offensive line I've seen in probably 5 years. It's very bad. And the running game has just not been able to be sustained at all. It's not been able to be sustained.
The one thing I'll say about Pitt's offensive line that just gives me a little bit of pause about this game, it's big. They're 330 across the center to left side of the line. They have some big kids on their offensive line, and when you look at Notre Dame, it just not that it concerns me, right? It just gives you a little bit of pause, like okay, like you can't just come off and actually they have 4 starters that are 330: Ryan Baer, Jason Collier, Blake Zubovic, and Branson Taylor.
I actually coached against Jason Collier when he was in high school. He's a West Deptford guy here in Jersey. He was a tight end at that point, so he's gotten a whole lot bigger.
He's added some beef.
They ran like the wing tee, I think, if I remember correctly. So he was just a blocking tight end in the wing tee. But
so he was your outside tackle, basically.
Yes, basically. I think they threw it to him. I think he had like 10 catches his senior year, but it was like for 10 catches for like 250 yards, like 45-yard par or something like that. So
and interesting too, Ryan, about the turnover thing. They have 5 turnovers in the season. They came in 2 games. They threw 3 against West Virginia and 2 against North Carolina. So in 5 of their 7 games, they have not thrown an interception. Like you said, they don't turn a ball over. And on the season, they only have 8 turnovers. 6 of them came in 2 games against West Virginia, North Carolina. In their other 5 games, they've only turned it over twice. So they don't turn it over. The problem is that's why, to your point earlier, Ryan, going back to the previous conversation, you've got to be locked in and focused and do your game and not let them get those cheap yards, you blew a coverage and let them get a first down on 3rd and 9. You can't allow this offense to do that, because you got to make them work for their yards, because at the end of the day, Ryan, they're just not good enough to beat you if you play your game. They're just not.
Well, you can't let up explosive plays in this game. Like you can't let up like Gavin Bartholomew will get like an easy seam down the middle where you just don't cover him, or Camonte Mumfield maybe beats one of the corners off of an easy release and he creates a big play or something after the catch. Like this is not an efficient team, so keep them in front of you and keep them being inefficient, right? Like don't allow them to create big plays, because I think that's the only way that this team. Like if they're able to get the running game going a little bit and they're able to hit a couple explosive plays, that's how this team stays in this football game. I just offensively, I just don't see it, man. If you play your game, I just don't see this team hurting you that much.
Agree. Other side of the ball, Ryan, they are good on that side of the ball. They're not great, but they're good on that side of the ball. They've got some weird stats though. This is what you and I were talking about before. Like you look at them and they rank 26th in yards allowed per game, 25th in yards per play. Because like the yards allowed could be skewed by, teams get a lot of short fields because your offense turns the ball over a lot. That doesn't happen here. They rank 26th in yards per play and 25th in 26th in yards per game and 25th in yards per play. That's why we like to use the per play numbers, because that gives a more, a better look at kind of your efficiency level and your overall offense, and can kind of negate some of the the total raw numbers could be skewed, like Notre Dame had against USC because they had so many short fields. And then you look at their rushing numbers, and they rank 48th in total yards allowed rushing, but they're 21st in yards allowed per attempt. They are 15th in they're 15th in tackles for loss. They pass game, they only give up 27. They're only 27th in the country in passing yards allowed. They rank 12th in sacks, and Pitt's always ranks really up there in sacks. I mean, they're usually top 10 most years in sacks.
Charlie Partridge does a really good job with that defensive line
Yeah.
traditionally. So
Yeah. And so so they're there. I mean, 41st in third down defense. They're not very, but then you look at their yards per attempt and yards per play in the pass game, or yards per completion in the pass game, and they're 97th in yards per attempt and 79th in yards per completion. And you're like, it's like there's a disconnect. I'm having a hard time coming to grips with their rankings. Like, how can you rank that?
Teams are efficient throwing the football against them, but they don't throw the ball much, and they're not efficient running the football against them, but they run the football a lot against Pitt for whatever reason. Like, that's what I take from this. It doesn't make any sense. Yes.
And then you look at it, Ryan, and you're like, okay, well, maybe they just don't have a lot of plays, but then they're 42nd in total plays on defense, and you're like, okay, I get it, right? There's just so many weird statistics, but then you say, okay, like the pass game statistics, like you'd mentioned. So here's basically why those numbers are where they are. When you look at their pass defense, they rank where they rank. That's because they're 5th in the country in fewest pass attempts allowed against them. So teams are just kind of grinding out first downs against them. That's what I mean. They're not giving up a ton of big plays. I breaking down their film. There's a couple games I haven't really gotten into yet, Ryan, but they don't really give up a lot of big plays from what I can see. They've given up 7 on the year of 30 plays or more. It's like 1 a game. So I just, I'm trying to find, reasons why their numbers are where they are. And it's kind of hard to come to grips with it. They're 34th in the country and fewest plays allowed of 20 yards or more. That's decent. So I've never seen a stats like this, Ryan, where I've had a tougher time coming to grips with what you see. And then you watch the film and you're like, yeah, they're good, but they're not a vintage Pitt defense. Like, there's not that.
No. They don't
Pitt
have
always
headliners on this team.
Yeah,
they
always seem to have like some D tackle that you're worried about, some D end you got to be concerned about, some tough veteran linebacker that's going to make a lot of plays, and it's an interesting unit. Now, there's some names on there that Notre Dame fans are going to be familiar with, not just Shane Simon, who obviously played at Notre Dame. He's a starting middle linebacker, but Notre Dame also recruited some guys on that team. They recruited David Green to a little bit. He's one of those. He's a Central Catholic kid. They recruited Donovan McMillan, who starts at safety for them. Notre Dame recruited him. So there's a couple kids. Rylan Gandy's a kid that Notre Dame looked at a little bit. Ryan, if you remember him from, I think, Buford. I think he played at Buford in Georgia. He's in there too deep at cornerback. So there's some kids that Notre Dame fans are going to be somewhat familiar with. Samuel Okunlola is, I think, tied for the team lead in sacks. That is the older brother of Samson Okunlola, who Notre Dame recruited obviously last year. So some familiar names for Notre Dame, but Pitt, Ryan, this is not a vintage Pitt defense as far as the results, but it is a vintage Pitt defense in how they play. They have not changed a lick on defense.
Yep.
I mean, they are who they are. That's the reality of it.
I think the two positions that best exemplify that is defensive line wise. They do not have a Kalijah Cansey. They do not have a Patrick Jones. They do not have that type of guy on this team, but they just have a bunch of solid to good football players.
Mm-hmm.
Like you mentioned, David Green, he's a very solid football player inside a defensive tackle. Dayon Hayes is a talented kid. Devin Danielson coming off the bench as a defensive tackle is just if you want to see what Pitt football exemplifies, watch that kid just smash his helmet against his head on the sideline. Like those are the types of kids that you're going to see on Saturday. I mean, the Jules kid, the DeAndre Jules, the other defensive tackle, is a solid football player. Like they're just all good, solid football players in the defensive line. There's no guy that's going to be an All-American. There's no guy that's going to be a first-round draft pick. Just a bunch of solid, And then cornerback, MJ Devonshire, who I believe was a Kentucky transfer originally. He's a good player, man. I like him. I like MJ Devonshire. And then Marquise Williams is a little bit of an undersized, scrappy corner on the other side. But, like, he'll compete his tail off. Like, you can get some stuff on him, but, like, he will compete, and there's no question he'll come up in the run game. Like, he's not going to shy away. So I think the cornerback position and the defensive line position specifically, like, what does Pitt football stand for? It's those two spots this year for me. Those that's what they exemplify.
Their stats are down on a per game basis, Ryan. They're still in the top, as you can see, they're still in the top 15 in sacks per game. They're down about 0.6 per game from last year, but they're up in tackles for loss per game compared to last year. So even without Cansey, who where was he picked? He was day two guy, right?
He got picked top 20, number 19 overall, I think, by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
He was first round pick last year. Okay, so first round pick. I thought he was a day two guy. First round pick.
Yep.
So you lose him, and he was very disruptive last year. And you're still averaging more tackles for loss per game than you did a season ago, right? Because that's who they are. They are about being disruptive. They are a team that is about being disruptive, and they don't have like one guy that's got a mess of tackles for loss. Like last year, they had 2. Cansey had 14, and the Dennis kid, I never can say his first name right.
He was a good player
12.
though, man.
Yeah,
good player.
He had 12, but then the next was like 6.5 and just a bunch of normals, right? We talked about how, sacks wise, they were a top 10 sack team last year, and they didn't have anybody with more than 7. Both of those kids had 7. You look at them this year, Ryan, in tackles for loss, and the highest they have is Solomon DeShields at 6.5. They're a top 15
also
team.
A New Jersey guy, by the way, Solomon DeShields.
Yeah, but like Deion Hayes has 5, Shane Simon has 5, DeAndre Jules has 5, and then Okunlola, Bam Brema, Bengali Kamara, AJ Woods, David Green all have 3. So it's a team effort. The scheme does a lot to get guys free. They attack, they slant, they bring guys off. I mean, you look at I mentioned their tackle for loss numbers, right? AJ Woods, what is he? He's a safety. Or corner, excuse me, a corner.
I think he actually plays a lot of nickel for them.
Yeah.
So he's like blitzing off the slot.
Yeah. You got one. Let's actually go to sacks because that'll give you a better idea. So AJ Woods is tied for 4th on their team in sacks with 2. You have, you have about 6 or 7 different DBs that have tackles for loss. Javon McIntyre has 1.5. Marquise Williams has 1.5. So this is a team that they're going to bring some corner fires. They're going to attack with their linebackers, but they really like to turn their D line loose. That's the thing, and they throw waves at you. So they don't have like Ryan. I don't believe, and I know you have an interview on the board with Deion Hayes that you did, who hasn't had the breakout. A lot of people think, but when you look at their numbers, they've got 7-8 guys producing. So they don't have that Kalijah Cansey kid. They don't have that Aaron Donald kid. They don't have that kind of disruptor. They throw waves at an offensive line.
It's a committee approach this year.
Exactly.
Committee.
Exactly. Yep. And that's worked for them this year in that regard. So they're a tough. So like if Notre Dame runs on Pitt, Ryan, that's going to make me feel very good about them being able to make the adjustments they need to make because this is still a stout Pitt rush defense. The yards are a little misleading because they've had some bad losses where teams have been able to kind of rack up some yards in the second half against Pitt, but overall, they're not an easy team to run on. They're really not. Because here's an example, right? Virginia Tech ran for 199 yards on them. They averaged 3.4 yards per carry. Wake Forest ran for 172 yards on them. They ran for 4.2 a carry. I mean, even Cincinnati 216 was only 5. Exactly. Yep. And North Carolina only ran for 77 and 1.97 per carry. Louisville, who ran for almost 200 yards against Notre Dame, only went for 80 at 2.4 per carry.
Yeah.
So you're not gashing them. You're just kind of because and part of it is because their offense can't score. So you just limit the big play and just pound it on them and don't give their defense chances to go make plays. Because that's something that Pitt thrives on too. Is they thrive on forcing turnovers, and this year they haven't been very good at that.
No.
So you got to make sure that can do. Last year they ranked 22nd in the country in turnovers forced. So the year before they ranked 19th. So again, Pitt the year before 13th. So that's who they want to be. They want to be a team that forces a lot of turnovers, and they haven't done that, and that's been a big problem for Pitt for Pitt this season. And if you actually look at Pitt over the years, the best teams they have are teams that are very good at forcing turnovers, and you've got to make sure that doesn't happen. So that's an overview of Pitt, Ryan. People getting a glimpse of Pitt. We're going to dive more into that. I'll have more in the breakdown tomorrow. Ryan and I have more of it on Thursday. You have an article. You'll have 2 articles coming out tomorrow that kind of dive into some of the matchups between the 2 teams at irishbreakdown.com that are very intriguing that Notre Dame has to win in this game. So you guys will want to check that out. Ryan's going to have some recruiting updates coming out today. But tomorrow we'll have that stuff coming out. So a lot more that we're going to dive into with this matchup online and then also on our shows. And then Thursday, Ryan, you and I will dive into the keys to victory and just the things that we think Notre Dame needs to do to specifically win this football game. And we'll go from there. So that's where Notre Dame is at when it comes to Pitt. That's where Pitt is. It's right. Here's the thing. You're coming out of that bye week feeling refreshed, and Pitt's going to try to take that feeling away from you as quickly as possible, which is physical football.
Yes,
That's the only thing I guarantee this weekend, folks, is it's going to be a physical football game.
Yep. I think that's perfectly put. And Notre Dame, I mean, we can lay it out for you guys, and I think clearly you see on paper, Notre Dame is the better team. They're the more talented team. They should win this football game, but we know that you have to go out and do it, right? You have to go out and do it. So we'll dive more into Pitt, obviously, throughout the duration of the week. We're going to get into our mailbag next. Make sure that you're putting mailbag questions into the chat, MB, before the question. Before we get into the questions here, though, if you could please just hit that like button for us. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast on any and all podcast platforms or on YouTube that you're listening to right now. Make sure you hit that notification bell on the bottom of the YouTube channel as well. Boards.irishbreakdown.com at the bottom of the screen for all your latest team and recruiting intel, as well as some things that you will need to know heading into Saturday's matchup against the University of Pittsburgh. Hit that like button, folks. We'll be here all week. Mailbag time, Brian?
Yes, time? And we will have some intel on the site this week, Ryan, from a recruiting standpoint. We don't have a lot of questions so far. Okay. So this, unless people throw in a bunch of new questions, this is going to be a relatively brief mailbag. So let's get right to it. My guy T Guns starting us over, man, with some over-unders.
T Guns, over-under 4.5, the number of times Pitt's new tight end gets mollywopped by the Notre Dame defense. I'm going over.
He won't play. He's
over
Dracovic. Yeah,
they're also like kind of deep at tight end too, man. I was doing like research. I'm like,
Malcolm Epps. I was like, I didn't realize Malcolm Epps went there. I had no idea until I looked at their depth chart the other day. I was like,
they're like 4 deep at tight end, and they have a very good one in Gavin Bartholomew at the top. I'm like, I don't know why you would make a tight end switch right now. It doesn't make much sense.
No, and I hate because I like Phil as a young man. I love that family. You know, I've gotten to know them over the years, but the reality is, when you get benched at quarterback and your response is to, I'm just going to move positions, it means you were already done. Mentally, you were done. And because to me, it's like if Sam Hartman got benched, you think Sam Hartman's like, go play slot. And he's like, dude, I'm going to go out here and have the best week of practice I've ever had because I want my job back. And I think, I just think Phil had been through a lot. Some of it not his own doing, some of it his own doing. Let's be honest. And I just think he was done. I just think he was done with just being a quarterback and just this. I mean, when he's talking about, can't believe people boo some. I mean, when you're hearing the boos like that, you're mentally shot.
You're not tapped in. You're tapped into the wrong things at that point. So
and it's unfortunate, but it's just that's the reality of it.
It's very unfortunate because last year before the season started, there were some 3rd and 4th round grades on Phil Dracovic at quarterback, and he has, I want to say sabotaged himself, but he hasn't helped himself at all in any situation here. So
no, and look, if teams could look at the film and say, hey, look, he plays on a bad team, his offensive line stinks, and they could maybe get past some of that stuff. But when you're then showing that up here, you're just not there. That's what's going to play people. He didn't play against Wake last week at tight end. I don't anticipate him playing at Notre Dame. If they're trying to beat Notre Dame, you're telling me they're going to put Phil Dracovic on the field at tight end over Malcolm Epps or some of the other guys they have, Carter Johnson, those other guys. No, they're not going to do that. They're not going to do that.
It's not going to help them win. It's not going to help them win.
No. Which means he will have missed the last 2 attempts to play against Notre Dame. So it is what it is.
Yep. We had Andre Tonso says, is Notre Dame the best 2-loss team? College football?
I have them ranked the highest as it's them and LSU are clearly the 2 best 2-loss teams in college football right now, Ryan, in my opinion. And so I have Notre Dame ahead of LSU for a couple reasons. I think they have better wins. Their overall resume is better.
They're polar opposite team too, man. LSU's a very offensive-driven team. Notre Dame's a very defensive-driven team right now.
I'm going to say this, Ryan. Yeah. If you could put LSU's offense with Notre Dame's defense, they're national champs. I'm dead serious. Nobody beats them. Nobody beats them. So, you are correct. They're polar opposites. But those are the two best 2-loss teams to me. I have Notre Dame as the highest ranked 2-loss team. I have them at 11th in the polls. I think I have LSU at like 16. And then LSU's got Bama coming up in a couple weeks. So they're going to get a chance to boost their resume a little bit in that regard as well. So, but yeah, I have Notre Dame as the best 2-loss team. Ryan.
I heard there was a projection for a bowl game of Notre Dame versus LSU, which would be a very interesting.
Yeah, and it was the ReliaQuest Bowl, which is the old Outback Bowl. Yeah. Right. Somebody was like on Twitter was like, I don't want to play LSU in some obscure like low bowl. And I'm like, it's actually not a low bowl. It's actually kind of a big bowl. It's the Outback Bowl. Yeah. But these bowls are changing names so much. It's like, I've never heard of that bowl. Must not mean anything. Yeah. It's like, well, it used to be a big bowl, like the Pop-Tarts Bowl. Like, man, I'm playing a stinking Pop-Tarts. What's a lame name? But this is the Champ Sports Bowl. This is the Camping World Bowl. This is the bowl that they played Florida State in a few years ago, and then in Iowa State in 2019. So they just keep changing their names, and it just become lamer and lamer. So
I want some Pop-Tarts now.
Yeah, I'm like, look, if y'all are gonna, I'm just still ticked at the Pop-Tarts Bowl because it was the Cheez-Its Bowl, and my dream was always to cover the Cheez-Its Bowl once and get up like a bunch of. I had this vision in my head that we're gonna get there, and our whole swag, because media a lot of times we'll get like a swag pack as well. I'm just a box of like bunch of different types of Cheez-Its. Nice. But now it's Pop-Tarts. I'm like, oh, I don't know, Pop. 45 years old, man. I'm not gonna get Pop-Tarts. But then I would eat them. I'd still eat them.
Yeah. We had a super chat from Tyler Evans. Thank you so much, Tyler. So what did you think of my Mike Elko national
not putting Michael not putting Riley Leonard.
Oh, not putting Riley Leonard back in the game, even though Riley wanted to get back in the game. Look, I'll say this. This is my take on Riley Leonard right now. Riley Leonard should not be playing, folks. Look, it's not even the high ankle sprain. I'm here to tell you, and I'm not going to put it out in the universe because it's not being put out in the universe. There's a lot more injuries behind the scenes on Riley Leonard right now than just a high ankle sprain, okay? And that kid should not be playing football right now. Just
Agree. And props to Riley Leonard for toughing it out and playing on Saturday night. And props to Mike Elko for not putting him back in the game, because Mike Elko knew what was about to happen with that decision. He knew they were going to be Florida State with that kid at quarterback. He knew that, but at the end of the day, it's a team game. But I'm not risking this kid's, because I'm going to need this kid to win more games this year, right? And I gained a lot of respect for both of those competitors this weekend, Ryan. I gained a lot of respect for because you could tell from the beginning Riley Leonard was not the same. And he's still out there juking dudes and making plays but when he wasn't like, his numbers passing weren't great, but he made a couple really clutch throws. But you had to respect the passing game when he was in the game. Once that was gone, they just shut the Duke run game down, because it's like, I dare you to have this kid throw the football. And the only thing I really had a beef with Coach Elko on Saturday night was when Leonard was out and it was 4th down and you're up 20-17. You needed to take the points. Just get something positive from your football team. When he decided not to do that, and Florida State gets the ball at the 4-yard line, they go all the way down the field, score, it was ball game. Game's over. Yeah. But I gained a lot of respect for Coach Elko, because it would have been easy. He knew, Ryan. He knew this. There's no way they're beating Florida State with Riley Leonard not playing. None.
Oh yeah.
And he made the decision anyway.
I mean, it was cool that they beat NC State 24-3 without Riley last week, but it's like, that's not sustainable, guys. Like, you're not going to do that against Florida State.
Exactly. So, it was unfortunate that what was a great game up until that point became a not very great game. Then they got hurt. And that's the problem with teams like Duke, Ryan, is you just don't have the depth to overcome the loss of a quarterback like that. You just don't. And it's unfortunate, but I think he made the right call. It sounds like you do as well. Not putting.
I mean, honestly, like I think you need to save Riley Leonard from himself right now. To be honest with you, like if I was Mike Elko, I might shut him down for a couple weeks as well, and maybe down the stretch, maybe if he's a little like, that kid's beat up, man, he should not be playing right now. Just shouldn't. So yeah.
Then who do they have the next? I'm pulling up their schedule. They have Louisville this weekend at Louisville. Then they're home against Wake. And then they have they play Wake on a short week. So it's going to be tough to have him for the next couple of weeks. Maybe you can get him back maybe for the North Carolina game on the road, but it's going to be tough. But it's unfortunate.
Very unfortunate. Benjamin Weiss with the super chat. Thank you so much, Benjamin. Appreciate it. How big of a super chat to recruit the Game Time ad for a Michigan Spygate reference?
Recut
Oh
the Game
man,
Time
I'll
ad. Yeah,
recut it.
that's
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
yeah. I wish I could do that, man. I would gladly do
Yeah.
that, but so the super chat, we have a one of our advertisers, Ryan, is Game Time, and I actually have used them. I bought Clemson tickets for my parents using Game Time. It's actually a pretty easy feature, but I have to cut a new ad every week, kind of.
Mhm.
So I did last week is one for like Pitt and USC, the Pitt and Clemson games, and so use it. I think he's wanting me to like cut it. Where like if you're looking for last minute tickets, if you're a Michigan staffer and you're looking for tickets to this week's Ohio State game, you know what I mean? Like that'd be great. That would be great. But yes, Michigan staffers looking to cheat. If you guys are looking for an easy way to buy tickets to games, use Game Time. GameTime.co is where you can go for your advertisement. There's no doubt.
What a mess that whole situation is right now, man.
I
What a
believe we have
mess.
some questions on it, Ryan. We will have a chance to talk about that when we get there. My guy Raymond Harton's mad at me.
Raymond said, and thank you so much for the super chat, Raymond. Shame on you, Brian. Pop-Tarts are awesome. Great week to get right. Go Irish, beat Pitt.
They are awesome, but I feel like they're for kids, and I just always feel like a child whenever I eat them.
Yeah.
So, but no, they are
very
awesome.
bad for the figure, Raymond. They're very bad for
unhealthy.
the figure, man.
Yes, very unhealthy. But no, you never heard me say Pop-Tarts don't taste great. That's the problem. But yes, I can't eat Pop-Tarts, man. I just can't do it.
There was a one cafe, I forget where I was, but they actually made like their own Pop-Tarts. Like
Really?
they made them in this, and it was actually delicious, and it was a lot healthier than the Pop-Tarts you get off the shelf. So
yeah. My mom makes toaster strudels. Somebody's talking about that. I bet Ryan is a toaster strudel dude. I don't know if Ryan is, but my mom makes
good.
those and they're phenomenal. So yes, I will.
Toaster strudels are good. They're good.
Yeah, I will dig that.
We had Andrew Kenny with the question: what team would you guys most want to see Notre Dame play in a New Year's Six game this year? Now that we are out of the playoff conversation.
We talked a little about this yesterday, Ryan. I mean, to me, it's Bama would be one, and then either Texas or Oklahoma. I want to play a name team, ideally, in a New Year's Six. Bama would be a great one. I think Notre Dame could match up relatively well against Bama, and that would be one I would want to see. Now, I'd be a little bit nervous about Notre Dame's skill players against Bama's secondary. That'd be a little bit concerning for me. But I also think Notre Dame would have a shot to keep Bama in check. But because that's a top chance for you to get like that statement win. Not only do you get a New Year's Six win, hopefully you're also playing one of the power teams that's considered to be ahead of you. So that's who I would like to see. But honestly, I said this yesterday, Ryan. With the suspense, Notre Dame's won a New Year's Six bowl. I don't care if they get Air Force. I don't care if they get a Group of 5 team. I don't care who they get. Just win and get that. Just get that over with. So that's one less thing that I got to hear from people about.
One monkey off the back.
Exactly.
Yep, I agree.
Exactly.
I agree.
Exactly.
Oklahoma would be very interesting, though. I would actually love that because I've grown a distaste for Oklahoma football.
We are on the same page on that, my friend. Absolutely on the same page on that. I'm going to ask this one, Ryan, because this is more for you. Andre Tonsil asks, is recruiting on schedule for 2025 and beyond?
I think 2025 recruiting is in a very good spot, Andre, because I would say this. I mean, you have your quarterback in the class, which is very important this time of the year.
Big time quarterback.
Yes. You have a legitimate 5-star talent at quarterback as long as he continues to develop and hits his upside. And you are filling out the class very well. I mean, you already have three defensive linemen in the class. You already have 2 running backs in the class. You have your tight end in the class. Deuce Knight is going to get some offensive linemen and some wide receivers to come to town. Guys like CJ May on the defensive side of the football are going to recruit their tails off on the defensive side of the football as well, along with Deuce Knight. So I think you're in a tremendous spot in 2025 because I think more than anything, Brian, like you've hit on a couple key positions early. Like you have a big time quarterback, you have a big time Viper in the class, you have the tight ends to make up for Nate Roberts decommitting. But a couple of your top guys, I'm speaking mostly about Deuce Knight and CJ May, but they're big time recruiters too, guys. Like they are going to be nonstop with trying to get kids to come into the 2025 class. So not only are you off to a good start to having just some great players in the class, some great recruits in the class, I think you also have the right type of early commits in the class as well that are going to recruit their tails off. So I'm excited about it, man.
I've heard a lot about Davion talking to kids too.
Yep.
Who's
It's
the
got that
first? Yeah.
that Florida swagger on him. Yep,
Yep.
I can see that.
Yep.
Yep.
So that's something that you hope is helpful for them, is having kids
Yep.
like that. But that's
Yep. Justin
you,
Thurman's very outward as well as far
but
as
to
his
your point
approach
though,
to
Ryan, where
recruiting.
are they from? They're from
Yep.
Alabama, Florida, right? Like, and you also Mississippi. Obviously, Deuce
Yep.
is from Mississippi. So you got Southern
Alabama.
kids. They're
Yep.
going to be playing on the 7-on-7 circuit with Southern
Yep.
players. But you also have Joseph Reef, who's from Illinois.
Yep.
You know, you've got a kid from Arkansas. I mean, most of your class right now is Southern kids, and that's not normal. Normally, when Notre Dame fills up early, it's I mean, Cam, you think about like some of the kids that they were early commitments in the 24 class was like CJ Carr. It
Mhm.
was Brandon Davis
Cam Williams.
Swain. It was Owen Wafels from Jersey, Cam Williams from Illinois. It's like mostly Northern kids, and then the Southern kids, West Coast kids, and all that came on later. This class, it's like you're starting it off with the Southern kids, and because your quarterbacks from Mississippi, your running backs are from Arkansas and Florida, your tight ends from Wisconsin, so that's a Northern kid. Your
Sure.
defensive linemen are from Alabama, Florida, and Illinois. So you've got some Northern kids, but it's mostly 5 of your 7 are Southern kids.
Yep.
That helps, in my opinion. That helps.
And literally, when you literally have just your last 2 kids are the Northern kids too. Literally, with Nate Roberts decommitting, all 5 of your first commits in the class, quote unquote, were Southern kids. All of them were Southern kids. So yeah, man, they are. It's very interesting to watch the 2025 class, man, because Notre Dame is hitting some areas that they've struggled to in the past, which is big time for
Early.
them. Big time.
At least a couple positions they've struggled to recruit that region at those quarterback has mostly been Northern kids, and then defensive tackle getting a big 300+ pounder.
Getting an edge player who had a lot of SEC offers out of the state of Alabama was pretty dang impressive, man, for CJ May. So.
Here's the other thing too about that, Ryan, is you're talking about a kid that, what did he say? You interviewed him. What did he tell you was a big reason that ultimately, I mean, he always liked Notre Dame. He'd been here before. He'd visited before Deuce was here, right? Like, so, I mean, CJ May already had.
He was trending towards Notre Dame, but Deuce Knight was like, okay, it's over now. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like,
this is a defensive end that's committing Notre Dame because of Deuce Knight. This is a kid, right? To your point, just because I like supporting points with facts. Okay, you said that he had a lot of SEC offers. Would you consider this an impressive SEC offer list, Ryan? Georgia, Tennessee, Ole Miss, South Carolina, Auburn, and Arkansas, plus Clemson, Miami, and Penn State. Would you consider that an impressive early offer list?
Good, man.
I'd say so. Yeah.
A lot of schools that do pretty well developing edge players too. So
exactly. So yeah, a really good start. And this will be part of the intel that we'll have. Is there's some really highly ranked kids from parts of the country that they're in a really good position with.
Yep.
And so Ryan and I have been doing a lot of digging into just that, because we wanted to get an intel piece out coming out of the bye. So we'll have something like that come out either today or tomorrow, just gathering a little bit more intel. So but hey, Ryan, you got to be a message board member to get that, buddy. So sign up for the message board at boards.ourspeck.com. I'm going to bring this one up too, Ryan, because this is also for you from T Smith 0323. Thank you for the question. He says, Ryan, could you see Jim Harbaugh or Lincoln Riley taking the Chargers job if it opens up this season? I thought the Chargers had been doing pretty good previous to this year. I haven't been paying a whole lot of attention, but now
they've been so like they have a lot of talents, but Brandon Staley is notorious for making some very bad decisions in very bad times.
Isn't he didn't you say he's a very analytics driven guy? Okay.
So he was the defensive coordinator for the Rams. I think he's a really good defensive mind, but analytically he chooses the wrong thing to do in the wrong times. Like going forward on 4th down and like third.
What's that? Something like that. They're like 2-4 now, right now.
Something like that. Yeah. Yep. They have a lot of talent though, man. Like Justin Herbert's good. Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen, Rashawn Slater at left tackle. They still have Joey Bosa on defense. Mike Williams. I think he's a little banged up right now, but like, yeah, they got Mike Williams. Like they have a lot of talent on that Chargers roster. It's just haven't been able to put it together under this coaching staff right now. So T Smith, to your question, I do think, because usually teams do the reverse of what they did on a previous regime, right? So right now they have a defensive coach. So I think they would go more of an offensively driven staff next. So Lincoln Riley would make sense as far as being an offensive mind.
And he wouldn't have
I
to
think
move.
Jim Harbaugh would make sense too, because obviously he's got the California ties, obviously for his time at San Diego and at Stanford and that type
And
of
the
thing.
Niners.
So yeah. So I don't know if it's those two teams in general, but like two coaches in general. But I think your mind is 100% in the right places. I would be shocked if they let go of Brandon Staley if the Chargers don't go offensive coach route next. I would be very surprised about that.
Do you think, take feelings about USC aside, Ryan, just look at this as
Yeah.
an analyst who follows the NFL. I don't, so this is a genuine question. Do
Yeah.
you think Lincoln Riley could be successful in the National Football League as a head coach?
No, I mean offensive coordinator. Yeah, I think that he's just going to have. I mean, if he was going to be my head coach in the NFL, I would have to have as an owner control over who you're hiring as the defensive staff and as a defensive coach. If he gets out of his own way, maybe. But like offensive coordinator wise, if Lincoln Riley wants to call my offense, sure. Come on, Lincoln. We can do that, man. Coach it college wise, NFL wise, absolutely. But like I feel like he would get in his own way as a head coach a little bit too much, personally.
So if you were an owner and you
Yep.
felt you had a really good GM
Mhm.
and Lincoln Riley said, okay, here's who my D coordinator is going to be, and you felt like, okay, this guy knows how to run a defense,
Yeah.
you're saying then
If you
maybe then.
if you could partner him as a head coach and he runs the same offensive system and he's able to really take that to the next level and you have a little bit more control over what the defensive coordinator is
Like
and
Vic
he's okay
Fangio
with
type
it,
of guy or something like
right?
that. Yeah.
If Lincoln Riley signs off on it, I would be like, okay, I think this could work, right? But if he wants all control over his complete staff, I'd be like, don't know about that
Yeah.
guy. Like, don't know about that.
Yeah.
I would have my,
That's fair.
I would not be comfortable with that personally.
Yeah. I like that Drew Tranquil had a big sack against the Chargers this past weekend. I did appreciate that, by the way.
Yes, he did.
He was pretty fired up about that. It was good seeing him. I knew he was with the Chiefs, but like I said, I don't watch football, NFL football. I was happy to see him wearing number 23 again. He just looks so weird with number 49.
49, yeah.
It didn't look right. So it's good to see him doing that. So okay, thank you for that answer, Ryan. Like I said, I could not answer that one.
We had a question from Andre Thompson who said, which side of the ball needs to dominate in the last 5 games? I think offense, I need the wide receivers to get better with execution on plays.
Well, if we're just talking about winning, they just need the defense to keep dominating, because then it's just kind of like if the defense dominates the next 4 games and the offense just keeps doing what they've been doing, Notre Dame's going to go 4-0. I mean, but if we're talking about, the original premise of the question and of the show, and Andre, where I think the premise of your question's coming from, it comes down to offense. You're spot on, Andre. I mean, look, if we're talking about this Notre Dame team taking a jump and not just winning games because you're just better than the other team, but actually growth, the word Ryan used at the beginning, is it going to show growth as a program? Are we going to go in the offseason feeling really good about this team? Hey, they got Bama in a match in a bowl game. Well, if it's just keep doing what you're doing on both sides of the ball, it's like, they're they're not going to get blown out by Bama, but they're probably going to lose, 21-17, 20-17 or something like that, right? Like,
Yeah.
But if you say, boy, you got Bama coming up, and like, man, the way our offense is playing with how dominant our defense has been, boy, man, I want this smoke. That's the 2 different things. And for that to happen, Andre, you're spot on. It's the offense, and it's not just receivers. It's receivers, it's quarterback, it's offensive line. It's all of those groups have got to play better. And here's tight ends keep doing what you're doing, because you know what I've loved about the tight end group? It seems like in Mitchell Levin's least effective pass catching games have been his best run blocking games. Like, so it's like you're seeing that group like, hey, even though we're not catching balls today, we're still helping. We're still making plays. Holden Stace did like almost nothing in the pass game against Duke. But who had the first key block on the game-winning touchdown run? It's Holden Stace.
Sure.
Right? So I feel like that group has given me what I need for the most part. Running back has given me what I need when they're utilized. Now it comes down to maybe using better. O-line, receiver, quarterback, to me, that's the order of what I need to step up in these next 3 games. Because I'd put offensive line ahead of receivers. Yes, the receivers got to get better, but Notre Dame, still an O-line driven team. You can't be the dominant unit you expect to be if the offensive line doesn't play better and play more consistently better.
Right.
That's the key for me.
Offense would be my answer too, Andre, because I also think that defense has been so consistent this year that I don't really have I'm not worried about a drop off the last 5 games as far as defensively. I think they're just going to be able to maintain it. Offensively, that's the side of the football that has the most concern and the most question marks moving forward. And if you're able to show that you are able to grow and to make those moves, then that leads even more outside of just the next 5 games to the offseason of like, hey man, like we're starting to get to that spot now, right? That growth is coming. So I think offensively, absolutely is my answer. I need to see growth on that side of the football. Defense, I just need to see exactly what I've seen. I don't need to see them grow. Like I need to see them be
Right.
what they are. Offensively, I need to see a lot of growth.
Right. Because like when we talk about defense, like, yeah, get better in the run game, get better on third down. But that's like, okay, that's the one thing you have been really good at this year.
Right.
Right. It's not like, man, if they don't get better in the run defense and third down, they're gonna drop a couple games or a game or no, that's not it. If they lose in the next 4 games, it's probably because the offense
Right.
has another meltdown. That's
Yeah.
probably what happens. Because that's the only reason
Yeah.
they've lost the first 2 games. I mean, honestly. I mean,
You lose
yeah,
like
I didn't like the third 19 call. You got to pick off that pass. Ramon Henderson's got to play that ball better, but it should have never come to that, right? If the
right.
offense would have done what they need to do, it never would have come to that. Louisville, same thing. You had a chance to be up on Louisville by 17, 20 points, 14 at the least, if your offense just does what it should have been doing. And, so that's the side of the ball that really, really step up. I love this comment here, Ryan, from Raymond. I'm trying to find it. He basically was like, talking about Pop-Tarts. He was like, shame on me for the Pop-Tarts. And I can't find his comment, but he was like, that's why he ordered a 3X of the pullover because he's eating Pop-Tarts.
I did see that. Yeah.
Very well played,
Yeah.
Raymond. Oh, here it is. He goes, that's why I had to order a 3XL IB pullover. So,
nice. I used to eat a lot of Pop-Tarts when I was young, man. I used to eat a whole lot of Pop-Tarts, but
yeah. All right. And then let's go down here to Joe Medina.
Joe says, how big of an influence do you think Marcus Freeman has on the defensive game plan versus USC? The aggressiveness shown by the D was reminiscent of the defenses in Marcus Freeman's Cincinnati years and his only year as the Notre Dame coordinator.
I believe Marcus Freeman had a role in this regard, Ryan. I think he had a role in and the reason I say this is I go back to the interview I did with Coach Freeman this summer. And I sat down with Coach and I talked specifically about the USC game. And he talked about how they didn't like the game plan. They went back and they looked and they didn't like the game plan. Now, to a degree, I think they felt they had to do that because you didn't have Cam Hart, who just got hurt the week before. You don't have Tariq Bracy, who's out that game and had played, so it was a little bit unexpected. They hoped that he could play that game. So you kind of had to go away from what had got you there defensively. But they ran a very passive game plan. It was kind of like, don't let Caleb Williams beat you. They weren't aggressive. They didn't attack. And Coach Freeman basically was like, yeah, we didn't like that. That's not who we are. We're not going to do that again. So I think Coach Freeman had a hand in saying, hey, look, we need to be aggressive. We need to attack. We need to do these type of things. But it was Al Golden who came up with the specific plan. So does Marcus Freeman have influence on the defense from hey, we need to be more aggressive. We need to do this? Yes, he does. But at the same time, it's Al Golden putting the game plan together. It's Al Golden, doing the coaching during the week. It's Al Golden that was basically came up with how they were going to attack. Right. So I do believe that Marcus Freeman's role was, hey, we need to be aggressive here. We need to attack. I wish he would allow the offensive coaches to be more that way. But that's sometimes what you get with defensive coaches. But he said, hey, we're going to be aggressive. We're going to attack. We're not going to sit back and play passive football again. But it was up to Coach Golden to put that plan together. And he did. Him and the entire staff put that plan together, and he called a great game. It was a great game plan, great execution of that game plan. Great in-game adjustments, great in-game play calling. It was absolutely outstanding. And when you consider that, like I said, USC's last touchdown came on a 18-play drive or 18-yard drive because of the punt return, it puts it even greater context. So, I think the influence is more philosophical. The rest of it is is on Al Golden. That's where that one should be. Scotty G asks, what did you guys make of Tobias being moved down in the depth chart after what Marcus Freeman had to say on Monday? I know he will still be on the field, but was surprised after his comments. Here's the thing. All the depth chart did was finally catch up to what had already been happening on the field. I mean, Tobias Merriweather hadn't started the last 2 games. So it's more of a reflection of that. But at the same time, Tobias has got to earn that spot back. You know what I mean? And so But having him number 2 in the depth chart, right, doesn't mean he's not going to play. Number
Right.
1, I think the depth chart was more finally catching up to what had already been happening on the field. Same with tight end. We'd already had Eli Raritan ahead of Davis Sherwood. We already had Cooper Flanagan was kind of playing next. We haven't seen Davis Sherwood. From what I can remember, I don't remember seeing him much at all against Duke. I think the Ohio State game's the last time I really remember seeing much of Davis Sherwood.
I barely remember him from his touchdown catch earlier this year, right? Like, didn't he have a touchdown?
Well, he had a missed block on the fourth down run against Ohio State.
Yeah.
He turned loose and tried to get free instead of just turning around and blocking.
Mhm.
And that was a big mistake by him. But since then, I haven't noticed him. I'm not saying he hasn't played. I'm just saying I haven't noticed
Right.
him.
Right.
But the last couple games, especially, I know he hasn't played a ton, and he's missed 2 games. So there's 2 games he hasn't played in. I don't know if he's injured or what, but PFF doesn't have him playing offense, a single snap on offense the last 2 games. I'm actually going to go look in special teams. He did play special teams against both teams, so he's not injured. He's just not part of the offense anymore. So again, that's that just now got updated. Eli Raritan and Cooper Flanagan just now got put on the depth chart, and so it's more of the depth chart's finally catching up to what the reality already is.
Yep.
But even specifically to the point, Ryan, yes, it's good. They've got to get Tobias more involved. I think that's my personal opinion. They need to. It was great to hear that from Coach Freeman. I've talked to some sources that said the same thing. But Tobias is still going to go out there and show it during the week of practice that he can make those plays. Because if a guy's not making plays on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday, how fired up are you going to be as a quarterback to make those throws to him on Saturday? And so he's got to earn that. And honestly, I don't care if he starts or not. He just needs to be part of the game plan. That's all I care about.
He's also only a sophomore, man. Like, he just needs some confidence, and he start getting his mojo back a little bit. Like I mentioned, mojo with a 6-year senior in Sam Hartman, but Tobias needs to get his mojo back too,
Mhm.
man. Like, the swagger's lost a little bit, and it's not fully his fault, but like, he needs attention to detail, and he needs to finish plays. Like, he needs to do those
Mhm.
things. So it only takes one big game for to get back in the good graces, though. So hopefully he
That's
gets an
right.
opportunity.
I'll ask this one, Ryan, because it's for you from Kaiser Soze. So he's taking a break from his evil mastermindery to ask questions about recruiting. And it says, guys, how have you seen Usual Suspects?
I have. Yes, I
Okay,
have.
good.
Yep.
Guys, how are we on D line recruiting? So, Ryan, I would like for you
Yep.
to address this since he didn't say specifically. I would like for you to address this from a 24 and a 25 standpoint, just kind of where things stand overall, just
Yeah.
big picture.
I mean, so 2024 class has been pretty much solidified for a while now. You have obviously the 3 defensive ends in the class, and Bryce Young, Cole Mullins, and Logan Thomas. Logan Thomas projecting as the Viper. And I think Cole Mullins, Viper early on, but I wouldn't be shocked if he was a strong side end at some point in his career as that big end. And Bryce Young as the strong side end as well, that maybe could be an inside player eventually. We'll see how that transformation happens. And then you have Sean Sevillano as your lone interior player. We have known that Notre Dame is continuing to keep their eyes open for interior defensive linemen like Nandi Akboko, who visited a few weeks ago, the Georgia commits for the Ohio State game. We know that Notre Dame is keeping their eyes open for another interior defensive lineman in the class. We'll see if they're able to get one into the class or not. But I mean, ultimately, I feel a lot better about defensive line recruiting than I did before the season, to be honest, because guys like Bryce Young, Logan Thomas have taken massive steps as seniors. I mean, Bryce Young is a legitimate top 100 player. I'd argue that he might be a top 50 player when all is said and done if he continues the maturation, because he's also going to be down in San Antonio for the All-American Bowl now. So he now has the All-Star opportunity to showcase that he can do it against the best of the best, even though he already has shown. I mean, he played really well against David Sanders Jr. a couple of weeks ago. So like he's done it against some pretty dang good players.
The number 1 O tackle in the 25 class, right?
He has an
Top
argument
5
as
overall
the
player.
He has an argument as maybe the best player in that class, man. Like the argument's on the table. I mean, he's a really, really good football player. So yeah, Bryce Young's taking a massive leap. Logan Thomas is getting longer. He's maintaining explosiveness. He's adding weight to his frame. He looks really good for St. Edward in the state of Ohio as well. So you need to recruit.
So raw too, Ryan. Like that's the crazy thing. Like he has so much room to still get better. So
and he's still producing, man, against some really good teams too.
Something else good about the 24 class.
Yeah,
I hate to say this because of the injury, but because of the injury, you're not seeing a bunch of SEC schools making a run at Cole Mullins right now, which is big because he's kind of been thrown under the radar because of the injury. But that's another very talented football player in that class.
Yep. So I think you missed out on, I think another interior defensive lineman should still be something that you should keep searching for. And I think Notre Dame is keeping their eyes open. For the 2025 class, you're in a tremendous spot early. I mean, you really are. I mean, you already have 3 defensive linemen committed in the 2025 class for Notre Dame. Davion Dixon as the pure interior player. You also have Joseph Reif, who I think could project potentially to inside long term, but he could also play big end. Might be a guy that can move inside. And you have a big time Viper prospect in CJ May in the class as well. So from there, it's about, hey, Christopher Burgess, a couple other Viper options that might be on the board. Like,
Damian
come
Shanklin being a
on
top guy.
down,
Yeah.
man. Yep, Damian
I,
Shanklin is a
and
Viper. Yeah.
I will say this too, Ryan, talking to some people. Don't be
Yep.
shocked if CJ May outgrows Viper. I'm already hearing that because like they love his frame. He's like 6'4" plus already, long arms, like really big feet. Like Joseph Reif, I was told has like size 16 feet and like really broad shoulders. So like
He's really
those are two
skinny too.
kids, yeah, that staff thinks over the next couple years and then the college are going to put a lot of size and strength on.
Yep.
So, but yeah, Damian Shanklin's one, obviously, and then Ryan will have some features coming out over the next couple weeks on a lot of the other guys as we've kind of solidified the board on that.
Yep.
But I mean, it's edge guys, Ryan. That's really where the focus is right now for Notre Dame. And
Yep.
here's one thing that's very clear from what we've seen. One thing that we know Al Washington likes a lot. 2 things I've learned about Al Washington: length.
Yes.
He loves length.
Yes.
And the other one is he's kind of got some Lou Holtz-ish type of thing. He likes getting like linebackers that you turn to Vipers that you grow into big ends you grow into D tackles, because he wants long and he wants length and he wants athleticism. He wants to be a penetrating, attacking D-line coach.
Yep.
And I think that's you're seeing I think something he's been fighting for with the D-line this season is like, let's let these guys loose a little bit. And as we've seen Al Golden do that, you're seeing that group take over. And it's not just one guy. Like Notre Dame doesn't have one great disruptive player. It's just all the starters and they're throwing waves at people. You bring in Gabriel Rubio, he makes huge plays. You bring in Nana, he's making plays now. I mean, so he loves length and he loves he wants guys that are athletic, and that's kind of how he sees getting them. But yeah, I'm with you, Ryan. I like where they're at. And here's the only thing that stinks. The 25 class, from what I can tell so far, not a very good D tackle class.
Yep.
And the guys that I really like Jarquez Carter, they're just undersized guys. And Notre Dame wants a little bit more
beef,
length and beef. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of what they're looking for.
Yeah.
So,
well, it does fit into Washington's wheelhouse, though. Maybe take a couple of those big ends and guys that can project inside and do that type of thing. Like maybe Joseph Reif becomes the next Riley Mills, like that could possibly be a thing. So,
yep. A lot of names on the board. So make sure you guys are staying tuned to irishbreakdown.com as Ryan puts more of the stuff out. Like you had an update today on Marco Jones, who right now is a linebacker who's a big-time player that would not shock me if someday he follows the Josh Burnham route to Viper. I mean, he's a big-time football player, man.
So someone asked me about that, though. I'm like, I want to keep that kid on the second level and just use the blitz him from different spots. Like, I don't want to just
see him
throw
playing
him
that will spot, right, Ryan? Is that where you see him?
Move.
Yeah, same here.
That kid can move, man.
And then if you want to have him rush the passer, then let him be like what Maris does and Jalen.
I was about to say they've done it with Maris, so like you don't have to have him be an edge full time to rush the passer if you want him to.
Yeah.
So
now we've seen him do it with Marist and Jalen. So I mean, we know that they can develop that. But yeah, he's a very talented football player. And from what I'm told, Ryan, and I know you've talked to him, likes Notre Dame a lot. So check out that update that Ryan has at irishbreakdown.com. You did an interview with him about the USC visit, just where things stand with Notre Dame. So definitely want to keep an eye on that. Definitely check that out.
We had Joe Allen with the question who said, there was some talk going around that Michigan should be banned for playing in the Big Ten championship game because of sign stealing. What are your thoughts?
So Ryan, I'm going to kick this to you here in a second because I talked a lot about this yesterday and you haven't had a chance to talk about this yet.
Yeah,
I'm a big believer that you're innocent until proven guilty in every facet, not just the criminal justice system, but everything in life. I mean, you're innocent until proven guilty, but there's very clear evidence that we are seeing that it's like, I saw the video you and I were talking about beforehand where they have the camera on they're like, it's like on the field, but you can see the Ohio State coaches and that dude that's in charge of all this is like staring at the sideline. He's got that thing in his hand. It's got all their signals on it. And as soon as Ohio State makes a call, he says something, the entire sideline starts yelling to the guys on the field. He's giving them the call.
It's supposedly the guy that's already been let go. I forget his name already, but
he's been
the guy that
Connor or whatever. He's been suspended without pay or suspended with pay or whatever. But you can tell that the entire team knows what he's doing. Right. So this whole rogue agent type of thing, no, they all knew he had their signs. Because then he would make a call, and then the entire defense on that one clip's going like this. They're giving a signal like this, right? And you're like, they all know what's happening. They all know what's happening. And then the one photo has somebody else on the sideline that has the stuff with the signals. Yeah, and it's not
bad,
good,
man. It's bad. I mean, they've already tracked like them being at games when they shouldn't be at games and doing it off of their own because like sign stealing happens everywhere, right? But like there is a line that you can't cross.
It's okay if it's done organically. It's kind of like if I'm at second base and you're a catcher and you're not doing a good enough job masking your signals, that's part of the game. That's on you. If you have a camera set up in center field and you're stealing signals of the catcher from center field, that's cheating. Like if a pitcher tips his pitches and you figure it out, that's a competitive advantage. I'm all for that. Don't tip your freaking pitches, right? But if you have a camera in center field basically saying, here comes the curveball, and then you're using a thing on your chest or you're using a trash can or whatever else the Astros are doing to get those signals in, that's cheating. That's cheating. Like that is blatant. You know the rules. This isn't a surprise. It's always been the rules. It's been the rules since Jim Harbaugh's been in coaching at every level. You can't do that. You can't do that. You can't be videoing and doing those things. That's not, I picked up your signals during the game. I remember them from last year. You haven't changed them. It's not that. It's way beyond the scope. So then the question then, Ryan, is what should be done about it? And now the Big Ten is going to have to
that part. Though I need to think more about that.
The Big Ten is going to have to make a tough decision here because you're going to look at it from twofold. Number one is, do you say Michigan can't play in the Big Ten championship? So what if they go beat Penn State and Ohio State? You're going to say our best team can't play in the Big Ten championship, but at the same time, you say, well, but what if Michigan gets into the playoff and eventually has to vacate all those wins because it was very clear that they were cheating.
You also don't want them to represent you when you know that they clearly have done ill.
Correct.
Like ill form of things. So
like somebody said today. Actually, it was on the CFB Nation channel. They had Dan Walken on from Sporting News, and they were talking about it. And Dan Walken made the point, and I disagree with the point. I understand where he's coming from, but he said, look, Michigan was good before all this. And I'm like, not really. Because this allegedly started in 21. What happened in 2020? Jim Harbaugh almost got fired because how bad Michigan was. And Michigan had been trending down the previous couple seasons, right? And so they were getting their butts kicked by Ohio State. They were struggling to beat Ohio State, and they were coming off of they were a disastrous program during the COVID year. I mean, disastrous. And they were 9-4 the year before, right? Got blown out by Ohio State, got blown out by Bama, got blown out by Wisconsin, got beat by Penn State. You go into the COVID year, and all of a sudden, over a 2-year stretch, Michigan is 11-8. 11-8 the 2 previous years prior to their playoff run, 11-8. So they weren't good before. And then all of a sudden, this stuff starts happening in 2021, and all of a sudden, Michigan is this great football team, and they're a playoff team 2 years in a row, and now they're this great team. Maybe it's a coincidence, Ryan. But there's just too much there for me to believe that it's a coincidence because look, people say I can give you my playbook, Ryan. If you and I are coaching against each other and I give you here's all the plays we're going to run, that doesn't really help you unless I have in there. Here's what plays. Here's when we're going to call these plays. That's the thing is
you can know what formation exactly and that type of thing.
If you know exactly what's coming, like it's like you and I go into practice. You're the D coordinator, I'm the O coordinator, and we're going to skim each other. And I said, okay, Ryan, here's the 15 plays I'm going to run during the scrimmage. It's going to be a lot easier for you to stop my offense because you can say, okay, well, let's put ourselves in the perfect play every single time. But you don't know that I got it. Actually, be a better example. One of my offensive coaches who I yelled at the day before says, hey, Ryan, here's the script for the scrimmage today. And then you say, okay, we're going to script the perfect defense.
Well, I don't know,
it's going to be a lot easier for you to stop me. You know what I mean?
One year of coaching freshman football, you could have gave me the entire script, every single play, and we still wouldn't have stopped anything that year. So We were that bad, man.
Well, if you'd
Dude,
had Michigan's play,
I used to
you'd had
send
Michigan's players, you'd have
everyone,
been okay.
Brian. I used to just yell SOS, SOS. It's like
Yeah.
it's over, man.
One of my favorite weeks of coaching was my first year. I was coaching at Wittenberg, and I was in charge of running the scout team defense as one of the offensive coaches. And our head coach said to me, he's like, because we're playing Wabash, who's at head coach at the time was Chris Creighton, who's now at Eastern Michigan. And they ran a really aggressive defense. And he was like, look, I just want you to throw everything at us. So like, I'm just like making up blitzes. Because this thought process is like, so eventually got to the point of the second day where it's like, okay, it's enough.
We're done.
Enough. Because like the stuff you're doing is like really unsound and all that, but just like we're just trying to be disruptive. But the point being, in all seriousness, it is not the same as like, it's not about stealing signs. I feel like it's being mislabeled. It's about sign. No, this isn't about sign stealing. This is about blatant cheating, where you're essentially. It's to me, it's no different than if you've tapped into their frequency of their headphones, and you're getting the calls. Like it's no different than if you had that. And to me, it's like, are they going to have to vacate these wins? Or I mean. We're going to find out. And so if you're the NCAA will not act in time to impact this season. Does the Big Ten, how quickly do this investigation? Michigan is saying they're going to be, you can say all you want that we're going to be open to it, but are they going to really be open? Or are they just going to, circle the wagons?
Could you imagine if Michigan won a national championship and then NCAA had to do their repercussions after the fact?
Yeah.
Like,
and look, I get it. Michigan fans like all the cheating that goes on in the SEC. Okay, that's fine, but that's a different kind of cheating. That's more of that everybody's doing it cheating. Like everybody pays players and all that kind of stuff.
And I think people lose the sight of one thing, Brian, and I know this is going to sound a little like, I don't even know how it's going to sound, but you were also stupid enough to get caught. Don't be stupid enough to get caught if you're going to cheat also. It's so dumb, man.
And I am curious kind of how they got caught. It sounds like he was buying it with his own money. It's like, dude, get a fake credit card with somebody else's name on it. Like, sadly, it's not that hard to do.
Don't you have interns or like assistants or something or
buddies? Hey, man, get me some of your military buddies to just buy tickets to games. And then, because like the way it is now, Ryan, it's like everything's digital. So I can give my buddy $200. He can go buy tickets and then send forward them to me, and nobody's going to know. Nobody's going to be the wiser.
Wow, Jim Harbaugh's coming to the game this week. Like,
like what the heck, man? So it's a really bad look, and there's no way you can convince me that people didn't know. There's no way you can convince me that people didn't know.
They definitely knew.
They clearly knew he had the signals. You can tell the way that they're acting on the sidelines.
Yep.
And here's the thing we're going to find out too, man. If they're not able to still do it. Penn State's going to now have to change up their signals, right? Ohio State's going to change up their signals. And apparently the sign stealing is going to stop now because you'd think because, now that it's known, but
you know what I feel so bad about? I feel bad that like now, like all the eyes are getting pointed at that Connor guy that got let go, which is like, dude, he should be told what to do and he did it. And we're going to act like he's the guy that made this whole situation up.
And even if he was... They knew he was doing it. There's no way you can tell me he wasn't doing it. He's being Troll Hunter said it perfectly. He's the fall guy, right? He's the fall guy. And then now you got to ask yourself, like, is there becoming what is the expression they use? A lack of institutional control of your football program. They've had to sacrifice practice times because they've done illegal practicing. Remember that a couple of years ago, Ryan? They got in trouble for that. Yep. Jim Harbaugh got suspended for 3 games because of the recruiting stuff. Now you've got this. At some point in time, you got to say, do they get the hammer? Not, for lack of institutional control and scholarships, fire coaches, and all that.
The people that he's sending to these games, I wonder if he's at least buying them cheeseburgers like he is his recruits.
Seriously.
I don't know if he is or
Seriously.
not.
Well, I love it how the guy that's making $50,000 a year is the guy that everybody's blaming for this, right? Like, where's he getting the money to pay for all this stuff too? By the way,
it was such an obvious scapegoat too. You're just like, guys, like that guy did wrong, but like he's being told what wrong to do.
Exactly. And again, even if you go all the way to granting the premise that I find hard to believe that he came up with this all on his own, once he presents that. where do they think he's getting this from?
Right.
Where do they think he's getting all this information from? Right? I mean, so it's just the whole thing is just ridiculous. And so to me, you know what I would honestly do, Ryan, is I would kind of let the season play out a little bit and just continue my investigation
Right.
and then hope that Penn State and Ohio State handle business, honestly. Because if
Mhm.
that happens, then you don't have to worry about banning them from the Big Ten title game. I mean, and
Right.
then maybe like once the Ohio State game is done, then that Sunday, maybe you announce that Sunday that, but now you have egg on your face because, okay, well, they just won the league and now you've got to remove them and send Ohio State. And it's a bad look. So
It's
they're in
gonna
a
be
tough
tricky
spot,
this late
man.
in the season, man. It's gonna be
They're
very
in a
tricky
tough
this late.
spot. They're in a
Yeah.
very tough spot. But that's what, if you're them, you just got to hope that Penn State and Ohio State handle business. Like the people in the main office of the Big Ten are probably like the biggest Ohio State fans right now. Just like,
Oh, yeah.
Ohio State, please run the table
Just beat
and
'em.
yes, and don't even like leave this up to them. You know what I mean? Just handle your business and just like don't make us make this decision because it's not. People can say whatever they want. It's not an easy decision. It really isn't. Because now
Yeah.
you run the risk of, okay, do you get left out of the college football playoff because of this? Hey, look, let's say Michigan goes out and blows Ohio State out and they blow Penn State out. And then they're the, okay, then the NCAA says, okay, well, fine, we're not going to let Michigan play in the college football playoff. And then you missed your chance to get Ohio State in. Because if Ohio State loses to Michigan in a close game and then goes to the Big Ten title game and wins the Big Ten and Michigan's not an option, Ohio State's getting in the playoff.
Yep.
Right? So
True.
it's not as an easy decision, I think, as people think. As fans, it's easy for us to say, screw them, don't let them play. But it's just not that simple. Because if you're going to still let them play games, Ryan, then there's a chance they could go beat all the teams that you're going to have eligible for the college football playoff. That's the problem. What if they go out and beat Ohio State by 40? You know what I mean? Like now all of a sudden you don't have a Big Ten rep in the college football playoff because Michigan's not eligible and Ohio State's just got smashed.
Yeah.
It's a tough spot.
I used to think that Jim was an honest person, man. He has not been the same since those boogers. He has not been the same. That really
You
turned
always
the
go
wrong
back.
way.
The toxic boogies. Ryan always takes it back to the boogies. I don't even know where to go with that.
That's where it went wrong, Ryan. That's where it went wrong.
Okay. All right. I know you have 2 children right now, Ryan, but
yeah. They also eat the
that
boogies.
happens
And they'll tell you about it
everywhere.
too afterwards. Like, Daddy, I just ate a boogie.
Yeah,
Okay.
like, okay. Oh my gosh. All right. I'm gonna have to tell my wife about that conversation. So anyway,
Okay, good.
Let's go to this next one, Ryan.
Archer452 says, speaking of offensive line, how do you feel about the projected offensive line for next year? Who replaces Joe Alt as it stands right now? Who would be your best guess for the starting 5? That's an interesting question.
Yeah, what I would do, Ryan, is I would I mean, right now, I think you head into spring. Tosh Baker's going to get a shot to start that at left tackle. He'll get a shot.
Yeah.
And then you kind of say, okay, what kind of growth does Emil Wagner make? Can he play left-handed? He's a guy that I would consider for that spot, although he's been a pure right tackle so far.
I would not move Blake Fisher. I just would not move Blake Fisher.
If I was going to, right now, based on how he's playing, no. I mean, if I'm going to move Blake Fisher right now, it's moving him to guard, not left tackle. Now, could that change in the next 4 games? Sure.
Yeah.
But Blake Fisher's done nothing right now to make me think he can handle playing left tackle. He's
Agreed.
physically capable of it, certainly.
Yep.
But right now he's going to have to play better. So it's Tosh, it's Emil Wagner, it's Charles Jagasol, or if Blake steps up and shows himself. I mean, the ideal scenario, Ryan, is that the next 4 weeks Blake Fisher steps up and plays the way he's capable.
Plays out of his mind.
That's the ideal scenario. Because his loss of weight and all that could help. It's not going to hurt him at left tackle, but he hasn't been very good in pass pro, at least consistent in pass pro. He still whiffs on guys. You can't have your left tackle doing that.
I don't think it was a flexibility issue for Blake, and I think that's probably why he wanted to lose the weight, to be a little bit more flexible, foot quickness and stuff. But like, man, his technique's just not great, man.
Right.
And I actually don't think Blake's the longest guy of all time. That's kind of something that I've noticed a little bit more as I've been watching. But yeah, I mean, I would love just it's got to be a battle at left tackle as of today, right? I mean, like, yeah, of course, Tosh is a veteran. He's played a little bit. Like, he's going to get a crack. Emil Wagner. I'm really interested to see what a first spring of Charles Jagasol looks like as well. I want to see what he looks like with the whole spring, because obviously he wasn't an early enrollee last year. dealing with the meniscus, and he wanted to wrestle, obviously. So I'll be very interested. I mean, right now you have a bunch of incumbents inside, but like I haven't seen anything from the guards either that I just feel like, yep, locked in the starting.
Yeah,
Like it should be a battle, man. It should be a
it should
battle all
be.
around.
I
Yeah.
would consider moving Pat Coogan to center and let him battle with Ashton Craig is what I would consider. You've got to get Billy Schrouth into the lineup. I'm sorry, you
Yeah.
just do. You do.
Yeah.
If you can't just, well, this guy knows what to do. Okay, then you're a freaking coach. Teach the talented kid how to play. I mean, honestly, Ryan, coming into next season in this spring, there's nobody right now that if Zeke Correll doesn't come back, there's nobody that's just like, yep, that's
I'm
that's
curious
the
about
starter.
Zeke in general too.
Let's
I
see what he's
mean,
going to do.
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know.
I'm not sure.
I'm right now because he's a 6-year guy. I'm assuming he leaves until told otherwise. That's kind of how I'm going to be with Howard Cross. That's how I'm going to be with a lot of these 6-year guys. Is just because I don't know. I don't know either side. I don't know if they'll be asked back. I don't know if they'll want to come back. I don't
Right.
have a clue. I mean, I don't know. Every kid's different, and so this is still, still a little bit uncharted territory because it's not because of devastating multiple injuries over the years like it used to be with 6-year guys.
I will say this, all due respect to Zeke, if he wants to come back, I'd be open to it, obviously. But like, I'm kind of excited to see Ashton Craig and just a little bit
Sure.
I've seen of him, man. I'm kind of
Yeah.
excited to see him.
He's
at
an
center,
athletic
but
kid, and he
yeah.
brings a little bit more length to the position.
Yep.
So, but right now, I mean, there's nobody on the offensive, and that's why I was a little disappointed by Coach Freeman's comment yesterday. Yeah, they're just going to roll with the starters they have, and I'm like, they haven't done anything to me to make me think that they just the two guards and just deserve to just keep being trotted out there, especially
Right.
with Pat Coogan at left tackle. But it is what it is. So I mean, I all bets are off. I mean, do I move Pat to center? Do I move Billy Schrouth to center and let him compete with Ashton Craig? I don't know the answers to that. How much of a how comfortable are you with Ashton
Billy
Coogan
probably would be
stepping
a pretty
in?
good center, don't you think? He'd
Yeah,
probably be a pretty good center, Billy.
potentially, yeah. But I just he's so physical that I
Yeah.
really want to see that at guard. Pat Coogan does his job, and he's a tough kid, but he does his job. Billy Schrouth can be a mover. And we've even seen that in the limited snaps he's had this year, Ryan, he'll have still inconsistent redshirt freshman, but man, when he comes off with good pad level and gets his hands on you, he moves you.
Yeah.
And they need that. So there's a lot of uncertainty. I mean, honestly, I don't even know if I could tell you who I think the starting five is going to be, other than just promoting the current depth chart, which is, it's Blake Fisher at right tackle. It's Tosh Baker at left tackle, and the two guards come back, and Ashton Craig at center. I mean, that's right now the only thing I could say, just because that's where the current depth chart is. I highly doubt I would be surprised if we don't see like Emil Wagner get a chance to win one of those jobs. Do they need to, like people said in the past, hey, the way you can convince Blake to come back is by offering him left tackle job. And I'm like, the way you convince Blake to come back right now is, dude, you're not going to be a first or second round draft pick.
Ask him to send his information into the advisory board for the NFL, and that will convince him to come back to school, is all I have to say about that.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so he should come back. Does Jagasol have a breakout? Does Sullivan Absher have a breakout? There's so many questions that I have, Ryan.
I really hope Charles Jagasaw breaks out, man. I think that kid could be absolutely special if he figures it out. But yeah.
Yep. All right. Last couple here, Ryan.
Okay. David Jones, do you guys feel that we have yet to see the best of Joe Rudolph's coaching, or is he who he is? I just get the feeling the offensive line would not have the struggles they have had at times with Harry Hiestand here. Well, I mean, David, it also would have been Harry Hiestand's second year with that group, right? And Harry Hiestand is, by all regards, a better offensive line coach than Joe Rudolph. I mean, so yeah, sure, but like that's not a fair comparison, though. I don't think that's 100% a fair comparison. But
well, I think it's a fair statement, right? It just lacks some context. That's what I would say, Ryan. Is you're usually going to be. I mean, think about Al Golden Al Golden lost Isaiah Foskey, lost Jason Adamiola, lost Tariq Gracie from last year's team, and the defense has been way better. Are we to believe that they're way better because Foskey left?
Right.
Or it's year 2 of the system. You and I talked about it all off season. They know him better. He knows them better. Right. That would have been true with Coach Hiestand this season. Yep. And as you mentioned, Harry Hiestand is considered one of the elite offensive line coaches on any level of football.
In recent year, like the last decade.
Right. Which it amazes me there's still Notre Dame fans that don't realize that. It blows my mind how many people think they know offensive line play that just have no clue about offensive line play.
Yeah.
I even just had somebody say that to me recently, that people would say, "Oh, here's the one." I think I told you this, Ryan. Guy tells me, well, the knock on Heastan, according to others, is that he could develop individual linemen, but not great offensive lines. And I'm
Oh
like,
yeah, you said that.
so the
You said
offensive
that.
line that only gave up 8 sacks the entire 2014 season, or 13 season, wasn't a great unit. The 2012 unit didn't play as well as together. That was a bunch of individual pieces. The 2015 O-line was just a bunch of individuals. I was like, even in 2016, the offensive line was pretty good in 2016. You had 2 All-Americans off that team. And the
Right.
offensive line wasn't your problem that season. It was your everything else. And there were so many of those just weird takes that I see. Like the 2017 line wasn't great as a unit. I mean, the 2018 unit was good. Well, who coached all those guys? Yeah, Jeff Quinn was the O-line coach, but who coached all those guys? Who built all those guys? So this is some weird takes, but I'll just answer it this way, David. I hope that we have not seen the best of Joe Rudolph.
I don't.
I have to believe that we haven't, because of what Ryan said. It's like he's in game 8 with this group.
Yep.
And yeah.
I don't think we've seen the best of Joe Rudolph. I think the question that you're going to be, because David, you do have Harry Heastan fresh on the brain, who is one of the best offensive line coaches probably in recent college football history, right? Is it ever going to be as good as Harry Heastan? Probably not, right? But is it going to be better in year 2 than it was in year 1? I think law of averages say that yes. So I believe that we have not seen the best of Joe Rudolph. Is it going to be to the level that you need it to be? That's the question you need to ask yourself. That's the question. Yeah.
And is this who he is? To a degree, that could be true. But I just think with experience comes greater consistency. Just don't know if it's going to be great.
Yep.
That's what we're still learning. So, yeah. And again, Ryan, this is consistent for us. We've said this about Al Washington. Yeah, the first year wasn't good, but some guys that had kind of bought into it were gone. Now there's more buy-in in year 2, and now look at the D-line. They're better than they were last year, despite not having a borderline first-round draft pick playing Viper for them.
Yep.
Right? You see it a lot. You look at Dylan McCullough, how much better his running back room is this year, despite it being way younger than it was a year ago.
You lost off that defensive line. You lost one kid that went to the Senior Bowl last year, who got drafted almost in the first round, and you lost another kid that went to the NFLPA Bowl at defensive tackle. So, you lost a couple talented kids off that defensive line and got better. So, I would agree.
Same thing for Jared Parker. Like, is he the guy? We don't know the answer to that yet. Either way, he's going to be better next year than he was this year. The question is it going to be good enough to compete for championship? Those are fair questions.
Yep.
And if I were to sit here and say, Ryan, yeah, this is who Joe Rudolph is, but that wouldn't be nothing but confirmation bias from someone who didn't necessarily love the hire to begin with. That's 100% of what it would be, based on how they've played. Because yes, they've had some moments, but they've also had some good moments.
Yeah.
I mean, this is still the same guy that got that line to play at a very high level against Ohio State. Go watch how Penn State's O-line played against that same defense this past week with supposedly the best left tackle in college football playing for him, right? So
JT gave him some issues this weekend too, by the way.
So that's my whole thing, Ryan, is if I were to say yes to that, like this is who he is, that'd be nothing but hey, Brian, you're biased because you didn't think he should have been the guy to begin with. And that's 100% what that would be. It's 100% what that would be. We've seen enough good to believe that it definitely can get better. But that's what these next 4 games are going to be about for me, Ryan. You've got the bye week. It's now time to settle these guys in. If he is the coach that we think he is, we should see at least some more consistency in these final 4 games. A little bit more consistency.
And this offseason is going to tell us a lot too, because you're starting from scratch a little bit with losing Joe Alt. Like you need to figure that situation out. You know what I mean? So yeah.
All right. Last 2 here, Ryan.
And Andrew Gilmore says, much of the Notre Dame media believe Al Golden is likely gone after this year. Has Notre Dame tried to approach him for an extension? He's done a wonderful job this year. Maybe a pay bump could keep him around.
Possibly. I think Al Golden is not necessarily looking for a pay bump just because. I mean, of course, I did a good job. I deserve to be rewarded for it, right? I mean, if I didn't do a good job, I'd be looking for a new job, right? not by my choice. So certainly the job he's done this year to me warrants the, if he finishes, because see, here's how I am, right? I am not negotiating contracts during a season if I'm an AD. Because I'm like, you got 4 games left to play, man. So like, okay, well, let me ask you this. If you guys don't play well the next 4 games, can I renegotiate the contract and pay you less money next year?
Nope,
Oh, no?
ink's dry.
Okay.
Ink's dry. Yep.
Yeah. All right, then here's the deal. How about we wait till after the season and then we'll talk about it. Now, once the season's over and these things continue and the defense plays the way that I think, Ryan, you and I both believe it will, yeah, I'm sitting down and probably strongly consider offering him a contract. But at the same time, as a head coach, you also need to be someone who wants your coaches to achieve the personal and professional development that they desire. And I don't think being the D coordinator at Notre Dame is the ultimate goal for Al Golden. And if I'm Marcus Freeman and he wants to take that look at something else, then I support that, because I don't know how much hotter he can get right now, because the perception is, and the reality is what he's doing right now is not with a lot of first-round draft picks on this defense. There aren't.
No.
I mean,
Nope.
Benjamin Morrison, is there anybody else that you view as a potential first-round draft pick right now that's playing a ton on this defense?
No, not right now.
No. Mostly what?
No.
Mostly day 3 guys, would you say, Ryan? Wouldn't you say? Most of them,
Yeah.
a couple D2s
like
scattered in there.
borderline
D2s.
draftable guys. Yeah. I mean, I think he's getting the most out of a lot of his players right now, which is awesome. It's great.
And that's what's going to really impress people. Like if he was doing this and he'd had Jalen Smith at will and Sheldon Day at 3 technique and Riley Mills at nose, and you had Isaiah Foskett at Viper, and you had Stephon Tuitt at big end, or Khalid Kareem even, or, okay, you've got, Manti at Mike, or Drew Tranquil at Mike, or whatever. And you've got Alohi Gilman, and you've got Kyle Hamilton at safety. All right, yeah, dude, you should have an elite defense.
Or even Al Golden is a Penn State guy, obviously. If he was the defensive coordinator for Penn State right now, all due respect to Manny Diaz, because I actually think he's a good defensive coordinator. But if he was doing this with the talent that Penn State has on defense, because there's a lot of first-round picks on that defense, I'd be like,
yes,
you're doing what you should be doing with that defense.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
Yeah, sure.
So I think he's doing a heck of a job, Ryan. Now we got to close. This is going to be the chance for him to strike while the iron's hot, to either A, become an NFL D coordinator if that's his desire, or potentially to be a college head coach again. Same thing with Dylan McCullough. If Dylan McCullough wants to stay at Notre Dame, I'll get you whatever pay raise you need to make that happen. But if Tom Allen gets fired, I'm doing everything I can as Jack Swarbrick and Marcus Freeman to get him the Indiana job. Why? Because that's what he wants, and that's his goal, and it's good for him, and it's good for us to help that. And because here's the thing, it's going to make it way easier for you to replace Al Golden and Dylan McCullough, because they got huge promotions. Because now people say, hey, you want to be a Big Ten head coach? Go to Notre Dame and, coach that incredible room, and then you can go get this opportunity. Go be the D coordinator for this team, and you'll get that opportunity. And there you go. I mean, but if those opportunities don't come, then you say, hey, Al, I know what you want to do. But just so you know, if those opportunities don't come, we want you back, and here's the offer we're going to make for you.
Sure.
Right? We support, hey, Dylan, buddy, you did a great job. Here's the pay bump you're going to get. If you choose to stay, we'd love to keep you, but we also understand you're going to go interview for that Indiana job. You're going to go interview for that other whatever job because you want to be a head football coach. You support that, but you also let them know, hey, man, we want you back, and here's the offer you met. So I think that's how Notre Dame should approach Al Golden this offseason. It's like, look, man, we want you back. We love what you're doing, but if that's the choice that they make, but we also understand you're gonna go make those moves.
What a change one offseason makes, Brian. I can just imagine it now. Al Golden leaves this offseason, and everyone's, oh my gosh, what is Notre Dame gonna do? It's
and you know what? They'll be fine. They'll be fine. And that's the thing, is they'll be fine because Marcus Freeman knows exactly what he wants from his defense. That's the side of the ball I'm least concerned about him making a good hire on.
Sure.
I just am. And if he thinks Mike Mickens is ready for that job, if he thinks Mike Mickens and Al Walsh are ready for that job, go for it. Okay. Because that's one thing. I trust him. I don't necessarily trust him to maybe make some offensive hires at this point in time. I don't. But if he doesn't think Mike Mickens and Al Washington are ready, I trust that because he knows them. But if he thinks they are ready, then I trust that too. He's earned a level of trust on that side of the ball because of how well this defense is playing, and because of his background doing that as well, in my opinion. Yep. So, but yeah, that's where I'm at. If Al Golden leaves, good for Al Golden, because it means he's getting the kind of promotion he wants and has earned with what he's done at Notre Dame, guys. And what he's earned. I mean, think about what he's done the last 2 years and who he's done it against, Ryan. 2 games against Caleb Williams, CJ Stroud, Drake May, Spencer Rattler, Tanner McKee. I know I'm leaving somebody off. That was another quarterback I thought they fit. Jaron Hall against BYU last year, Riley Leonard, and both years, the Ohio State receiving core, the USC receiving core the last 2 years, the North Carolina receiving core last year, which was, I mean, I did see a box score yesterday that had a whole lot of catches and yards for Josh Downs.
Right? 5 for 125 this week. Yep.
And so he's done this against some really good offenses and NFL talent. And he's going to have a resume the last 2 years says, I held CJ Stroud to a season low. We shut down Drake May. We just embarrassed Caleb Williams on national TV. We shut down Riley Leonard. Like, there's a lot of quarterbacks that you all think are great players in the NFL, and look what my defense did to them with J.D. Bertrand and Jack Kaiser and Howard Cross. You know what I mean? Like, he's going to be coveted, in my opinion. And but if he wants to stay in college, stay in Notre Dame. All right, cool. If he doesn't, then Notre Dame will be okay, because I trust Marcus Freeman to make the hire necessary to get him to that level. I do. But yeah, I can't wait for that, Ryan, when all these people that wanted him fired a year ago are like, oh, they're going to suck next year because Al Golden's gone. That's going to be a lot of fun.
It's fantastic.
It's going to be a lot of fun. Yep.
Always fun.
This is the last one right here.
Andre Tonsil says, is Irish Breakdown growing the way you want it to, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, we're way ahead of schedule, Andre, and I appreciate you asking. I mean, are there places I want to get to? Yeah. I mean, the day that I decide I've done as much as I can at Irish Breakdowns, the day that I probably approach Ryan or Vince or somebody about buying me out and taking it over themselves, you know what I mean? Like, you always want to grow. You always have to adapt. Things are always changing. I'm going to be having well, they don't know about it yet, but we're going to be having a staff meeting this week talking about some different things that are going on right now at Irish Breakdown. So, yeah, we're having great growth. I mean, we're way ahead of schedule. I mean, we were shooting for a goal of 3,000 subscribers to our message board before the start of next season. We got there before the start of this season. You know, we've had in September and August and September, we set all-time highs for page views on the website, for listens on the podcast. So it's been great, man. We're excited about it and very happy about it, and hoping to make more staff hires and more things that we've got going on in the future. So yeah, it's actually growing a lot faster than I thought. That's the key. And that's always a positive. And then we had such crazy growth the last 2 years. I thought, well, I think, Ryan, you and I kind of talked about this before the year. Like, I expected things to stagnate this year a little bit because we had such growth the first 2 years, and it hasn't. It just keeps growing. And it's not quite at the growth the last 2 years because it's never as much, but it's still much greater than I thought. All my projections were here, and we've been above all my projections. And that's ultimately the goal, right? Is you have to make, as a business owner, projections about what you expect to be that year. And anytime you go beyond your projections in revenue, that's a positive, because that's a great thing. So yeah, I'm excited about it. Very excited about the future, and a couple moves that we tried to make this season, before this season, that didn't quite fall through, that would have been big, and we're going to try to keep making them again next year. So very excited about the growth, and always trying to do things so it doesn't get stale. Right. Yep. And, you know, like just something as simple as moving recruiting to Friday and the mailbag to Monday, just to, like, man, I wasn't feeling like, man, I just felt like we were in a bit of a rut, and so, hey, let's change things up. Or is this really what's best for Ryan, having him have to do a recruiting show on Monday when it's Monday? You're still trying to gather information from the weekend. I mean, is it, you know, is it the best time for you all? Can you get your questions in about the previous game when you only can do super chats on the post game show? It's like you got to pay to get your opinion about the game just got played. I didn't love that. Not that we don't appreciate it. So we're always going to keep trying to do things. And we ask you guys to do your part, which is continue to listen and continue to watch, sign up for the message board. But also, if you got Notre Dame friends and stuff like that aren't on with us, talk to them, man. Have them come watch our show. If they're like, oh, I've heard this about them. All right, fine. Listen anyway. If you haven't listened before, then listen anyway. and I think people will really like what we do. So yes, it is. Is it growing the way you want it to? Yeah, it is, and even better, and especially Ryan too, because this is not exactly the greatest economy in the world right now. You know, a lot of people are hurting and struggling, and we've had people that have sent emails like, "Hey, man, I'm sorry I had to cancel because times are tough right now." I
Yeah.
mean, and I get it. I completely get it, and so we'll keep rocking and rolling, and I'm excited about it. But I appreciate you asking, Andre, because questions like this, to me, I always take as like you guys care about what we're doing and who we are, and so I'm always willing to answer them, and I'm an open book to a degree about certain things, and if something you guys care about, we'll let you know. But yeah, I'm excited about what we're doing, Ryan. I really am. And there's other parts of the business that aren't getting a lot of attention right now. Like I'd love to be more active on the merch, like making new stuff and all that. But it's just like right now we got to focus on other things. Eventually we'll get to the point where we can do that. And I'm looking forward to it. So anyway, that's it. That's where we're at. So Ryan, why don't you go ahead and take us out of here, man?
Well, thank you all so much for the support, because we wouldn't be able to do this show or have this mailbag right now if it wasn't for you all. So before you leave, you can just hit that like button for us. We very much appreciate it. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Tell a friend. Make sure you hit that notification bell as well. You'll know when every show this weekend is going to pop up, so you all will be ready and willing to go. Make sure to go to boards.irishbreakdown.com. As Brian said, we'll have some intel for you all this week coming out of the bye, working towards the final stretch of the Notre Dame season. Thank you all again, and we will talk to you very soon here on the Irish Breakdown podcast.